You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. And by the way, meant to tell you, it sounds like it's your laptop mic instead of your regular mic. For some reason. I don't know why. But I'll tell you, I get goosebumps every single time I hear that lightsaber thing go and our intro comes out. I thought I might just mention that one. That's pretty cool. So, this is probably, I imagine, the last episode of this What is Star Wars series that we're doing. You're the one that came up with it, so I mean, was there anything else that, besides all the films that you wanted to do in this? Are we going to continue this? I mean...
Yes, we're going to go through every episode of the Clone Wars non-display.
Yeah, exactly. You'll be happy to stop it just so you don't get these 70-page PowerPoints from me every week.
Hey, I know, right?
Yeah, this might be the longest one yet, actually. I think it's like 73 slides we got today.
I figured it would be, considering, The Rise of Skywalker wasn't exactly a short movie either, so...
Well, I mean, the funny thing about it is, and, I don't even, it's not like I include every single scene from all these films.
I don't know, man. It's pretty close.
Oh, there's a lot that's cut out. I mean, because here's what I do, just so everybody knows the process. Pretty much what happens is I watch the movie, obviously, and then while the movie's going on, I take notes at, like, a lot of key scenes that happen. And I usually end up, depending on the movie, somewhere between 60 and 80 key scenes. And then I just sort of back it off from there. I mean, what I could have done, in hindsight, if I really wanted to, because, of course, we have our 3-box thing that's got pretty much our thumbnail graphic in it. I could always go to that for, other stuff. But again, I mean, honestly, these are one of our more popular videos, and I think that part of the reason is because we just take the time to go through every little thing on it. So, not to disappoint anybody, overall, at least what I'm thinking, when we're dealing with this last one. Now, of course, I think the Colin Trevorrow's version probably, at least on paper, was a lot better. I think it would have fit the tone of The Last Jedi a lot better. I think it would have been a much better follow-up. But from what we got, we got this incredible breakneck pacing. Like, the pacing in this movie was just insane.
Absolutely.
I mean, it was just crazy. And unfortunately, I think that if you can really sum up the whole sequel trilogy, and it's certainly true for this movie, there's a lot of really cool concepts that are introduced, but it's just poor execution. It wasn't quite handled correctly. I think there's a lot of things they could have done. If they wanted to stick with the story, it might have actually, I hate to say it, been better off broken into 2 films. Of course, there's in case of glass, or in case of emergency, break glass, the Palpatine factor that came in, which of course we'll deal with once we actually start getting into the slides of the whole thing. But I mean, overall, it was a fun movie. I mean, I thought it was a lot more fun than The Last Jedi. I thought that it actually probably felt a little bit more Star Wars-ish than The Last Jedi, but I don't know. I think it just suffers once again. The same thing that the entire sequel trilogy did. It wasn't planned out well. JJ wasn't even the original director. They changed the story. And I mean, to be honest, it's amazing they even came up with anything. Oh, wait a second. I got to get this on here. Hold on. This is coming through. Come on, comment. There it is. Our good friend Chad. I need a whole new hope before HP strikes back. He's referencing something that happened at work today. I got you, buddy. I got you. I'm going to figure out the issue. I'm going to figure this out. We were making some Star Wars references today at work. So, which of course he appreciated. That's good. And by the way, Chad, I don't really see any likes on the video yet. So, why don't you get a like going? Why don't you show the rest of the audience how it's done? Still don't see a like. It's like I'm gonna sit here and wait. But yeah, I mean that's basic. There it is. Thank you. That's basically what I think this whole thing suffered from. I think the Rise of Skywalker, more than anything, suffered from a lack of planning, the fact that they didn't really get together beforehand and map out the story of this whole trilogy. And obviously, it had the cumulative effect, right? Like The Last Jedi had suffered a little bit. And now that you're getting in the last movie in the series, I think it just really went kind of down from there.
Yeah, it just seems like everybody they were just trying to, save or salvage whatever was left from The Last Jedi, and you know how split the fan base was after the release of that movie. So it seems like, of course, with Colin Trevorrow not being at the helm for this one, and then bringing JJ back, um, he had some work to do because there's a lot of loose ends that we
Yeah.
had to tie up from from Force Awakens to Last Jedi, and then of course whatever was presented in the Rise of Skywalker. So um, yeah, he had a lot of issues, and that was the thing. Everybody kept hyping it up, like, "Oh, this is going to finally conclude the Skywalker saga, and it's going to answer all the questions that we've always wanted to know, and everything like that." That's what we were promised. So this movie was approximately about 3 hours long. So that's a lot of content that you have to kind of fit in there without with making everything cohesive. That's where I'm going with it, to make everything cohesive. And as you aforementioned, it did go at a breakneck pace.
Yeah, it did. Well, you know what else really, I think, and of course, this is no fault of anybody, but I think one of the things that threw the whole thing off was Carrie Fisher's death.
Yeah.
She was supposed to have a really prominent role in this thing. And, unfortunately, she died before the thing went into production. So they had to rewrite everything. And I mean,
Hmm.
honestly, being that she was to be the featured character in this thing, I think that that's one of the reasons why you saw a little bit of a disjointed thing. They had to try to scramble and redo the story really quick, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, we can't, ignore that fact either. And that's a very valid point that Harrison Ford's Han Solo was supposed to be kind of like, he was the main in the Force Awakens. So that was kind of like his film to kind of really shine. And
Hmm.
then The Last Jedi was supposed to be Luke. And then the last one with Rise of Skywalker was supposed to have been Leia or Carrie Fisher. And unfortunately, she did transition before that movie could be shot. So I remember there was a lot of speculation about this. Are they going to recast her? Are they going to,
Yeah, that's right.
use a bunch of footage? And there was a whole bunch of stuff that was kind of going on in the family, and Disney kind of decided we're not going to recast. We're going to we have footage from the other films that we can fashion together to make her story fit um in this, or a story, because I don't think that was the story they originally had, of course, but they
No.
had a story that they could use to put her into this.
Yeah, and basically, I Am Just Me 2010 says was totally rushed. They could have split this movie into two. Absolutely, that was another thing. If you're going to go with this story, I think that um, that's definitely something that
Yeah, they guys could have pulled an end game, um, Infinity War type thing,
mhm.
where you have you know one section of it, or even the Twilight Saga. They did it for their finale.
Yeah,
They
or Harry
had two
Potter,
films.
right?
Harry Potter. So many other franchises have done it. And it worked and it made sense. And I think if they would have done it, even with the death of Carrie Fisher, they would have had more time to to see how everything was going to play out, the fans' reaction to it before making the second half of that film, and you know, really um, giving us a really good product.
Yeah, and I just stuck a poll in to our chats. Basically, should Leia have been recast? So, while we're chatting away, guys, just, answer that one. I'm really curious on how many people think that the role should have been recast versus not, because, I mean, obviously, it would be horrible to actually recast somebody especially a classic character in the middle of a trilogy. On the other hand, in a lot of ways, as much as that would have been painful and it would have been really sad, I think that it would have eventually righted more wrongs. And of course, as part of our whole slide thing, I mean, we'll get to the whole Leia part, but I think ultimately, even though it basically satisfied all the warm and fuzzies for the fans, I think it just created more problems. I think if they had recast the role, it definitely would have helped with some of the story parts, but who knows, right? All right, so basically, The Rise of Skywalker. This is the last film in the sequel trilogy. It was directed by J.J. Abrams. I believe it was written by Lawrence and man, what's his son's name? Was it like Jason or something? Kasdan. I'm pretty sure. I know JJ had a lot to do with it. There was even rumors that George Lucas himself went in and like rewrote a bunch of things in the last act. But I don't know if that was ever verified, actually. If anybody out in the audience knows that was verified, let us know in the chat or let us know in the comments if you're watching the rebroadcast. So let's get this thing started. So first of all, as usual, we always have our opening crawl. And right from the beginning, I mean, it's so funny because this movie just started bothering me like right out the gate. It's like, okay, you got this whole, hey, the dead speak, the galaxy's heard this mysterious message from Palpatine, and you're like, what? I mean, this is not something you put in an opening crawl, man. I mean, we actually had to go to Fortnite to get the scene. And they could have easily have put that in there. Just put a simple little scene in there. Something, some context.
Yeah, I mean, I think people would have. I mean, we already knew that Palpatine was coming anyway because of Celebration.
Yeah, but not everybody saw Celebration. You got to look at.
No. I mean, what I'm saying is that we knew he would be back because of Celebration. However, yes, I think that this is a huge plot point that you don't want to just have in writing. You should kind of just. It's kind of a big deal,
It's a very big deal. I mean, I remember reading this, and again, you're right. I think for you and I, it probably softened the blow a little bit because, look, we knew because of Celebration, because of a lot of the announcements, because we follow this stuff naturally, we knew that Palpatine was going to be in this, but...
And from the trailer, I mean, his cackle was heard in the trailer.
All right, yeah.
But here's my thing, though. Here's the part that really annoyed me. It wasn't even so much the fact that this was in writing. I could understand a creative license in that. Okay, fine. Here's the part that ticked me off. You don't put the scene in a Star Wars movie or any Star Wars medium. You put it in a video game on Fortnite. Not even a Star Wars video game. It's on Fortnite, which has nothing to do with Star Wars at all.
Right. No new canon novel, no... maybe comic book or something leading up to it. It was in Fortnite.
Jedi game. Yeah, it's Fortnite. Yeah. That's like putting that in the middle of a Call of Duty or something like that.
Right.
The heck does that have to do with anything?
Which they might as well have. Like you could play maybe they have a Palpatine skin or something. And it's kind of like, when he was being cloned or whatever, he did a couple of missions on Earth with
Afghanistan.
Right. I mean, it was just so ridiculous to me. I don't know. Maybe we are overreacting in this, but I actually think that that's a fair point, though, because, again, I do think that was a big complaint a lot of the fans had, and again, I mean, I can't stress this enough. The writing part of it wasn't bad. Like, when we get to this scene here, right, Kylo Ren is raging. This is something that I actually liked. Now, it wasn't 100% clear when you first saw the film. This is one of those things that you don't really get until, like the second, third, fourth, 20th, whatever time you see it. But essentially, they basically put in the opening crawl, like, look, Palpatine's back. He gives this whole galactic-wide message. Now you got Supreme Leader Kylo Ren, who's like, you know what? This guy's a threat to my power now. So he's got to go. And his
Mhm.
whole attitude is we see even when he confronts Palpatine, it's like, look, I killed Snoke, so
Mhm.
you're next. And
Yep.
I like the fact that even though they didn't make it 100% clear when you're first watching this, I do like the writing aspect of, okay, Kylo gets wind of this and he decides, hey, this is, I'm not doing this. I'm not going to be some loyal follower or anything. I'm going to go kill this guy because he's not going to take my empire, my first order away from me. And so, of course, in this opening scene, it's just brutal. I mean, he just starts going to town on these guys and, captures this the Sith
The
holocron
Wayfinder.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
the Wayfinder. I always call it a holocron because I mean that's really
That's
what it is.
what it
I
is.
mean, let's
Yeah.
just call it what it is. You're gonna clean it up with the Wayfinder term, and I get it. Maybe
It's
that's a type of holocron,
it's like a Star
Wayfinder.
Wars Waze map, with the Waze
Exactly.
app.
I mean, did you not find that a little on the nose? The Wayfinder. I mean, it's really.
Well, my thing is not to beat the dead horse, the proverbial dead horse here, but we knew Star Wars. You knew it's kind of was in trouble when we saw the opening crawl. It's like, oh, the dead speak. It's just like, okay, like why aren't we hearing this? And this would be great to hear. And I want to hear what Palpatine actually had to say. Like, what was everyone's reaction when that happened?
Right.
I mean, there's so many things
Right.
that like comes to mind when you think about that. So it's like the fact that we didn't get that out the gate, and
Well,
then
it leads to
now we're
other
going through here.
opportunities too, right? Because, and look, we've dumped on this film a lot about how, and we're going to bring it up again, where everybody just
Keep
suddenly
rolling.
knows who the Sith are, right? I mean, and I think they did that, which is a glaring error in my opinion, actually. But I think the reason why they did that was because they realized, like, we didn't add any context about Palpatine's message, right? We just kind of said it happened. So now we have to overemphasize the fact that the galaxy is sort of up on all this. But you're right. Without the context of this guy's message, we don't know what was talked about.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah, it's like, okay, so this is taking place 30 years after the events of Return of the Jedi.
mm-hmm.
So it's still like, and let's just, once again, okay, everybody knew that Palpatine was pretty much the Emperor, but no one ever really, he never showed himself, he never really talked too much during the original trilogy. So now you gotta think about it like, okay, this guy just makes some broadcast like, this is Palpatine. Like, how do they know that's what he sounds like?
Yeah, how do they know it
I mean,
was
he
even
just didn't.
really him? That's a good
Exactly. It
point.
could have been somebody could have made some recording. Somebody could have just been messing around. Like where's the I know I'm probably putting way too much thought into this, but I'm just saying, like, when you look at it for what it really is, and I get it, suspension of disbelief, but it's like, okay, 30 years ago, like this guy's been gone for 30 years. That's just like almost of like Jeffrey Dahmer. I mean, granted, the whole Netflix, series kind of brought him back to life. But I'm just saying, like, if you didn't know anything about him, like most of these kids wouldn't even know who Jeffrey Dahmer was. So now all of a sudden, oh, Jeffrey Dahmer's around. Everybody's like, well, who the heck is that? It's been 30 years,
Well, I'll even go a
and you didn't
step
even see
further.
him do, and you didn't even see him doing the original trilogy at all. No one really
Well,
saw him. You saw
see, and
Vader.
this is getting to my point here, right? Because here's the problem I have, and again, I'm going to bring this up later, so everybody just buckle up because I'm going to bring this up a lot. Okay, this whole Sith thing. This is what really bothers me about this
This one does
because,
really bother you.
well, no, here's why though. This goes into your point, and I actually, honestly, I didn't even think about this until now, but it makes it even more ridiculous because this is something you keep bringing up periodically when we discuss some of these things on various shows. But all these people start talking about the Sith like they know exactly. Now, I've always come from the standpoint, again, I'm going to bring this up later, so like 20 slides from now or whatever. But nobody really knew who the Jedi were, right? I mean, because Palpatine had crushed the whole thing, like nobody's allowed to speak their name and all this other stuff. So eventually they get sort of lost. People start to think that the Jedi are a myth. But all of a sudden, we're just throwing Sith around. You know, even Zori Bliss is like, and it was actually a funny line, you know, when she finds out that they're trying to translate the Sith language from this droid, and Zori's like, who do you know that's speaking Sith? I thought that was a fantastic line. But here's my problem. And this goes into a point that you've made on several shows. The Imperial officers didn't even know that Palpatine was a Sith Lord. Okay? They really didn't know. They knew that Vader maybe was a fallen Jedi. Maybe because, you know, I mean, the action figure said Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith. But, you know, we do know, canonically speaking, that they didn't even really know where he came from, that he was just some weirdo that Palpatine basically hired.
Well, you got to think about it, though. Like, his okay, so I guess we can surmise that, like, all right, look, in episode 4, when they're all sitting around that table, and Mahdi is just basically going off, like, you know, after Vader makes that whole speech about the ability to destroy a planet is insignificant next to the power of the Force. Your devotion to ancient religion hasn't. So, okay, they knew about it. They knew who he was. They knew, like, okay. I mean, of course, you know, people kind of like, okay, your devotion to it is cute and all, but it doesn't really mean squat. And then Vader proves himself by choking the crap out of him. Now everybody in that room kind of knows it. And then, of course, Vader is choking out Imperials left and right with the Force.
By
I mean,
Empire,
like,
yes. So, I mean, I will grant you that, okay, fine. By Return of the Jedi, especially, people know he's a Force user. But they don't really know if he... First of all, they did not know he was Anakin Skywalker.
No, that part, that I agree.
They never knew that. And that's something that Lucas
Tarkin
and all
knew
those
that.
guys said. Yeah, Tarkin was the only one that really knew that. And maybe a handful of some of the higher up guys or something. But nobody generally knew that. But the bottom line is, during the time of A New Hope, and especially by the time Return of the Jedi, I don't think they really knew whether he was like a Sith, a fallen Jedi, you know, what? Or maybe just the Force in general, right? So, I mean, but they definitely didn't know the Emperor was.
Right.
And like you said, the Emperor basically hid away and let Vader do all of his stuff. I mean, they've covered that even recently in comics and all that other stuff, that very few people, first of all, even saw the Emperor. And then even those who did, they didn't really know his whole deal. There was only a handful of people like Masameda and all those guys that actually knew who he really was. He's Darth Sidious, this crazy powerful Sith Lord. So to me, that makes it even more ridiculous that, you know, you have all this, like, suddenly. Now, granted, I'm going to contradict myself here, because I think that what the writers were trying to imply when they basically gave this opening crawl was Palpatine just ended up revealing all that, right? Because the Final Order has Sith troopers. It's, you know, he's not exactly... It's almost like the Sith are gonna rise again, and they really could have called The Rise of Skywalker The Return of the Sith, or which would have actually been kind of a cool flip on Return of the Jedi, right?
Yeah, but that's kind of like a little cheesy, like, it's a little on the nose.
It is, but
like,
what isn't? It's Star Wars. I'm just saying. I'm saying they could have. I didn't say they should have. There's a very important distinction there. I'm just saying, by the story that they've written, they could have done this. That's all I'm saying. Not saying they should have. All right, so now Kylo goes in, and this is another thing, man. I mean, again, interest of time, I appreciate the filmmakers not trying to waste our time, but at the same time, it's like all this stuff's happening fast. Kylo gets the Wayfinder. He kind of looks at it. He jumps in his TIE, whatever it is. I forgot what they call it, actually. It's not like a TIE fighter. He's got like some TIE destroyer.
It's like an interceptor or something.
Yeah, I think that was it. Actually, I think that is it. I think it's a TIE interceptor. He jumps in this thing, he goes right to Exegol, and he goes up and he basically confronts Palpatine. Now,
Yeah, I mean that's kudos to Kylo because that's gutsy.
oh, it is.
Considering who he you've heard about him, the stories from Luke, Leia, Han. So they all told you the stories of as far as your grandfather and Palpatine and how everything was. You gotta think about it. If your grandfather was like one of the most powerful Sith Lords, and then this is the guy who's holding his leash.
I thought
Yeah,
that.
how much powerful could he be?
I used to think that.
Yeah, and he's just walking up on him like, "Yep, I'm gonna kill you." Like,
I know, but here's the thing that's really cool about that, because you have to remember Kylo's attitude back in The Last Jedi, where it's like, let the past die, kill it if you have to. Because at first I did think it was a little bit strange that him being such a disciple of Vader and holding Vader in such high esteem, you would think that he would want to impress his master. I mean, that's why, honestly, was it the Halloween special or the holiday? It was one of the Lego specials where they were doing all these like time travel things or whatever, and Kylo ended up back on the bridge of Return of the Jedi, and Palpatine's like, oh, all right, maybe you should be the
future,
guy.
huh?
Yeah. I mean, that was totally hilarious, but you would think that it would be something along those lines where Kylo would want to basically impress his grandfather's master or whatever. But I think Kylo's attitude here is like, no, look, I'm the guy in charge now. I don't want to already answer to Snoke, and I killed him.
Well, yeah, I think I agree with you. Like, I know his headspace was. I'm just saying that's still kind of like he didn't walk in there with any fear whatsoever. He was just
That's
like, all right, let's walk in. I'm gonna kill him. It's like, dude, you do realize that this guy was your grandfather's master. So you thinking that you can just walk up on him. First of all, he's coming back from the dead. That should tell you one thing out the gate.
There is that. Yeah.
I mean,
well, he also made his former masters. Like, I made Snoke, and of course is another thing we find out Snoke's origins finally, where he made Snoke. But it kind of goes into your point, though. It's like, okay, the guy who was throwing you around like a little football, yeah, I made that guy. I mean, there's a little bit of a, maybe you want to be a little bit more respectful or hear Palpatine out.
Yeah, you might want to, have some put a little respect on his name, as they would say.
Well, but I mean, again, I think that one of the cool things, though, besides the fact that I have to say, I kind of enjoyed the fact that Kylo was just like, nope, I'm done with this.
I did. I did too.
I'm not dealing with any more threats to my power. I'm tired of all these guys coming and trying to tell me what to do. I'm going to do what I want. These guys are, if you challenge my power, you're
Bobby Brown, man.
Pretty much.
Bobby Brown is my prerogative.
But here's the thing. I also liked, on the flip side of that, the way Palpatine handled it. Because you think that Palpatine could have just been like, oh, geez, I'm going to just kill this guy right now. But he's like, hey, listen, you could kill me, but I could give you stuff. So, I mean, I thought that part was kind of cool. And this is basically what he was saying he could do. It's like, look, man, I'll give you this entire Final Order fleet. Which kind of made Kylo go, oh, yeah? Tons of Star Destroyers with Death Star lasers on them. Yeah, maybe I'll rethink that.
Sharks with laser beams attached to the heads.
I thought the same. I was thinking, I could not unhear that line every time I saw this, honestly. And again, this brings up, look, there's a lot of times where, yes, sometimes you have to do your old suspension of disbelief thing. It's not science fiction, it's science fantasy, on and on it goes. But you do have to wonder, where did you get all the resources, and where did this thing even come from? You've got like tens of thousands of these things. Who knows where they're getting the Kyber from? Well,
unless he was building these during the time of the Empire. Because remember, he did have this whole thing into the unknown regions. So, and that's kind of where
Yeah.
Exegol is. So, if he was
Yeah.
kind of having it, he had his whole contingency plan about Jakku and everything like that. So, in
Yeah, but
theory, he
look,
could have had all this kind of just.
when the boss goes, people kind of tend to slack off a little bit. Now,
Well, yeah, these are probably already ready though.
well, here's my problem is this. This is why I think that we needed more than an opening crawl. It's because
Hmm.
when exactly did Palpatine resurrect himself? We know that this
Hmm.
is the point where, okay, surprise, I'm making an announcement to the world. Here I am, just
Hmm.
kidding. But, obviously he wasn't resurrected at that point. He was obviously resurrected at some other point. And so the question becomes when? Because if it was, say, 5 years after, 2 years after, there's been a lot of rumors that you're going to find out through the Mandalorian, Ahsoka, and all that they're starting to build up that Palpatine thing. When was Palpatine starting to pull the strings? Now,
Hmm.
obviously, Snoke probably knew of his existence because if he made Snoke, then that means he was around sometime during the whole First Order thing. So it would really help if we knew exactly when was Palpatine back in somewhat the shadows, but in command, though.
Yeah, that's a valid point. I mean, like I said, we never got those answers.
We never did, and that's part of the problem. And again, I mean, I will say this. I think that some of the writing, maybe not the execution, but the story part of it, though, it's nice. It makes sense. It's kind of cool. But this goes to show you, and this is why I caution everybody that starts yammering on about the Colin Trevorrow thing, about what a brilliant script and everything Duel of the Fates was. It is. But that doesn't necessarily mean it would have been a great movie. Lots of things on paper.
Yeah, yeah, it's all about the execution.
It's all about
And
the
that's what
execution and the
and
direction and
we're
all that.
we're definitely gonna go through that as this
Oh yeah.
show
Yeah.
goes along.
Yeah, you guys are gonna if you enjoy when we make fun of stuff, then you've come to the right place. This is gonna be a really fun show for you guys tonight. All right, so now we see some of our heroes on the Falcon, right? You got like Poe, you got Chewbacca, you got Finn.
Finn.
Yeah, and then you had some weird creature named Claude or something. It's like where did that guy come from? You
Well,
know?
he's part of the new rebellion and or the
Well,
resistance, I
I
should
get
say. And
that, but
then
it's like I don't know. Some of this stuff just bothered me. But anyway, they go and they get this message from this spy, and obviously what they're setting up, and this is something else I thought was really cool that they should have explored more and maybe taken more time. And this goes into I Am Just Me's point. This goes into a point that I also made earlier where they should have probably broken this up into a couple of different films. Because I like the whole idea of a mole in the First Order. It's a little 24-ish maybe, but,
but like I said, we've seen that happen in Rebels with
yeah, Fulcrum,
Fulcrum.
which was actually two different people, right? It was,
Yep.
I keep forgetting the name of because Ahsoka was the second
Callus.
Fulcrum. Callus, yes. Yes. Oh, David's back. David says, hello, gentlemen. They could have recasted Leia. In fact, I think they should have just reboot the whole thing. Start from the beginning and do it better. Correct some continuity issues. The thing is, I don't disagree. That's the problem. I really don't disagree, but that's not going to happen because of the hundreds of millions of dollars spent to do it. I think the best that we can hope for in this situation is what we would call a soft reboot, which is over time with things like The Mandalorian and stuff like that. Oh, Ronaldo's with us tonight. Hello, my Ewok friends. Hey, what's up, Ronaldo? With basically with all these series that they're coming out with, they could start to go around. Now, of course, a lot of this has been diminished because we find out they're going to make more Rey movies, right? They announced that at
Hmm.
Celebration that Daisy Ridley's back, and they're going to make another, Rey-centric movie. It's going to take place like 15 years after Rise of Skywalker, but they can actually do this and still somewhat softly reboot the series. But as far as like a hard reboot where they actually remake 7, 8, 9, I mean, there was talk a little bit about, hey, if they do Timothy Zahn's trilogy, and I had even argued that they could take Finn, Poe, Rey, they could actually make the Timothy Zahn trilogy with the sequel trilogy's characters and still make it work. But I don't know. I don't really see that happen. But speaking of stupidity, we get this other thing now, this light speed skipping that they do when they're being chased. So they get the message or whatever from the spy, from the mole, and now they do this new thing, right? It's like we got to do these new things. We got to one up everything, and they do this whole light speed skipping thing, which I'm kind of mixed on. On one hand, I think it's kind of silly. On the other hand, there's a certain amount of sense that it makes if the Nava computer could actually do it fast enough. That's my only thing.
Well, I like the lights. I mean, it was cool. It was a cool thing to do because it kind of ties back to A New Hope with Han. It's like, why can't we just jump? Why can't we just jump? And it's like, oh, well, you just can't just do that, man. You might end up in God knows where. So you need to make sure that you have the coordinates set and make sure everything is cool before you make these jumps to light speed or, you know, and whatnot. So I like the fact that Poe being who he is, taking those risks and, being an amazing pilot that he is, it's that arrogance. And that's the younger arrogance that I think maybe Han probably tried something like this when he was younger, and that's how he learned
Well, and
by the
even
time we got
older,
to A New
right?
Hope, like, hey, you can't do that.
Well, don't forget, in The Force Awakens, he did that incredibly, which is even more brave to me than lightspeed skipping, where he came out of lightspeed like right in the atmosphere of Starkiller
Hmm.
Base. I mean, it's, you
Right.
know, that's pretty. But again, I mean, sometimes I think that they do these things for a couple reasons. Number one, I think it's kind of lazy. Number two, it sort of violates some of the rules that they've already established in universe, which is never a good idea. But even if you want to say, okay, we're just trying to establish the fact that Poe's like some hyper amazing pilot that can do this stuff. Why?
And he's a daredevil, and they didn't know how they were going to get out of it though. That was the thing. It was like, all right, well,
I
they
guess,
kind
but
of ran out of options, and so it's
yeah,
like,
the
well,
writers seem to have run out of options, it looks like. Uh, Ronaldo basically says about that. The scooper Jeff Snyder said recently that she's not the protagonist. She's a very important character, but not the main one. Also, that Finn's back. We'll see if it's true. Well, this is in regard to the
Daisy
Ray
Ridley.
movie. Yeah, the Daisy Ridley movie, the Ray movie that's coming up. Of course, David said no one needs another Ray film. I agree with this, but basically, John Boyega did make Nicey Nice with Kathleen Kennedy again, and I have no doubt. And they actually had the lead of that film, whoever it was, because you're right, it wasn't Daisy Ridley. The lead pulled out. So there's rumors that this leaves room for Boyega to come back, and, who knows. But you know what? They might actually say, oh, not happening. So, I mean, we don't.
Right.
All I would say is don't get too comfortable with this film, because it may or may not actually happen. Now, the fact that they got Daisy Ridley to sign on to it means that it's probably. And Kathleen Kennedy did say during the whole celebration that, look, these aren't new announcements. This is stuff that's in the pipeline. It's in the works. Speaking of Rey, so Rey comes and now she's training and now she's floating. She's got these rocks going. It's looking all, Buddhist now. And this
Tranquil.
is showing, ooh, I'm so powerful in the Force. But she's trying to connect with all the other Jedi, which she kind of spends the whole film with this whole stupid, be with me, be with me. I cringe every time she says that. It just bothers me.
It's like I'm one with the Force. The Force is with me.
Yeah, kind of, but but see now with that, it was more repetition that started to drive me nuts with it, you know? But I don't know, it kind of fit the character. I mean, it's just so stupid. I mean, I'm not trying to.
Oh man!
And again, there was some cool things about the idea that now Leia's training her, and you know, she more or less took over as Rey's master, and Rey now is obviously further along. She is looking at the Jedi texts all the time. I like the fact that they showed her doing that, and that she's still trying to basically find her place, right? She's trying to figure out, well, where do I fit into all this stuff? You know, and she has all this power, but she's still struggling with who she is. She's still, on one hand, and we'll see this throughout the film, she's more or less accepted, hey, I'm nobody, I'm just Rey. That's something that they bash you over the head with throughout this entire film, which in a lot of ways I think was a smart move. Of course, it doesn't last very long. See, that's the problem, is that they do some of this stuff. Ronaldo says, have you read this scene in the book? It's very good. You know what? I don't.
Yeah,
I don't
never
think
read
I
the Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah,
no,
I don't
we
think
didn't.
I ever did.
Nope.
Yeah, in fact, I don't think I think I might have read The Force Awakens. I may have done that because I do remember that whole thing where she technically met Poe at the end of The Force Awakens, even though in the movies it was Last Jedi. Yeah, I don't think I actually read The Rise of Skywalker. So, no, Ronaldo, I haven't read it in the book. I'm sure it probably was cool because you didn't have to worry about, robot extra footage Carrie Fisher rolling around, trying to, do like little reverse stunts, and all these like Max Headroom kind of things. But we'll get to that. In fact, let's get to it now. You have these awkward Leia scenes. Now, on one hand, I have to say, I applaud them for what they were able to do. This is not an easy feat. They didn't want to recast. They wanted to honor Carrie Fisher. She is Leia. And they wanted to put her in this film in some capacity. And they happened to find some extra footage from The Last Jedi, probably The Force Awakens, and was like, hey, let's just use this. And for what they were able to do, it was good, but it was awkward. I remember you and I talked about this after the movie, that it's like, as cool as it was, and it was nice that she was technically in episode 9, they probably should have just left her out of this.
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes you could tell it was shoehorned in, and there was other times where, like, some were better than others. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, well, like that whole line, where she said some, and it's like, never underestimate a droid or whatever. It's like that was so obviously part of another scene.
Mm-hmm.
The whole giving the lightsaber, taking the lightsaber back, and all that. I mean, these were just so obvious. Hey, this is the footage we got. Let's just write a scene around this. And like you said, it was shoehorned in. It was sandwiched in a very unnatural way. And I think that maybe the happy medium here is what they could have done with just, look, let's just take the scenes that make sense and put them in and maybe leave the rest out. Maybe we don't have to honor her that much. Let's honor her without overdoing it.
Yes, we don't have to use to honor her to a degree, like but sometimes pushing the envelope yields bad results at times, although well intended.
I'll tell you, man, it took me out of the movie a couple of times. It really did. I mean, I was really it was jarring in some cases, to be completely honest with you. I just saw another chat comment. Yeah, here we go. It's Ronaldo. He says, I think they should have recast. I know it would have felt weird for many people to see Leia and not see Carrie Fisher's face, but overall, it was a good effort. Listen, they probably. I would have even been okay if they had just done some like hack, deep fake type thing, like what they did with Tarkin, what they
Hmm.
did, because with the amount of times that she was in the movie, obviously that whole technology wasn't quite there, but it was a little further than it was in Rogue One.
Yeah.
They still had a couple of years. They could have. I think that would have been a better thing. Just put her face over the thing. Maybe use a couple of. Here's what they could have done. They could have put a couple of scenes where it was actually unused Carrie Fisher footage, because, like you said, there were a couple of scenes where, I mean, it was okay. It wasn't great, but it was okay. And then maybe the rest of it just deep fake it, because then you could have gotten a more meaningful film that way, and people would have understood. Ronaldo goes on to say, I think it would have looked better if they do it today. Well, yeah. I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
I mean, not that I'm not disagreeing or anything like that, but I mean, A New Hope would look better if they did it today too. You have to,
Today's technology, and you have to realize
yeah,
where they were.
where they were at the time. You can't hold off making a film simply because, but you're right, it would look way better if they did it today. A 12-year-old on YouTube could do it better today. All right. So Ray and Poe, this is another thing I kind of liked. I liked the idea that everybody wasn't so buddy-buddy and friendly all the time. This is one of the things that made the original trilogy work so well.
Hmm.
That you had, and again, you've got Finn kind of in this Luke role in a sense, and then you have Rey and Poe sort of in that Han and Leia thing, right?
Yeah.
Where they're clashing and they're arguing. I also like the fact that it wasn't just some like romantic comedy style arguing. Poe's point was like, look, you're off training and that's all phenomenal, but you're also one of the best pilots. You're also one of the best people that we have. We kind of need you on these missions.
Hmm.
And, her whole thing was like, well, you're all totally reckless. You're just going off. You're destroying my ship. You're just doing whatever you want. So I like that.
Yeah.
I thought that was
It
cool.
definitely had that the argument definitely had meat and volume to it. It wasn't just like, oh, why didn't you tell me you were leaving? Well, you were busy. Like, no, it wasn't like that. Like you said, like a rom-com thing. This is actually like dealing with the situation,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of like, all right, well, yes, I could go there and help you guys, but then I could be even more help if I'm better at what I do. Because we don't know what we're going to run into. So the more I can, but he's like, but the things are happening now. I mean, so I get it. It's kind of that rock and a hard place.
Yeah.
And Finn is just trying to be like, hey, look.
And Ronaldo, look, Ronaldo pointed out in the chats, he said, look, these three had very good chemistry, and they do, which is
Hmm.
why I'm glad they end up on a mission together. And so, of course, now we get to the whole point where this whole conversation, this is where they start throwing the Sith thing around. It's like, they decode the message. It's like, oh, Palpatine's back, and you know, they just start throwing, like I said, the whole Sith term, and it just, and again, I didn't hate it, but I just found it strange that you had the Sith. There were only two of them at a time. Like nobody even knew about them. I mean, even at a time during the prequel trilogy when people would have known about them, when they actually were there, they still didn't know about them because they all thought they were extinct for a millennium.
Hmm.
So here you have two Sith at the height of the Jedi, all these Force users who can sense anything and everything except fish, obviously. But that's their one Achilles heel, as we learn in The Phantom Menace. But you have these guys, and this would be the time where you think, but even then, Sith, no, it can't be. Nobody's really heard the term. Now, all of a sudden, like a good 50 years after the prequel trilogy is over, 30 years after the original trilogy, and actually probably a little bit more than that, because We're into the third film of the series, so probably more like 32 years. Now all of a sudden, everybody knows who the Sith are. Now it's true. I remember when we've bashed on this before, and don't forget, you could actually go back. It would probably be interesting to do this if you had the time. Go back and watch our original review right after we came out of the theater. We did a non-spoiler review, but then I think that following week or a couple of days later, we did a full-blown spoiler review of this. And this is something that both of us were kind of bashing on the whole time. It's like even the Jedi were considered myth. The Sith were barely even known. And yes, I remember somebody in the chat, probably Ronaldo actually, pointed out that they were a race. And yes, we know that. But, the race hadn't even been around for a long time. So.
Yeah. I mean, once again, the Sith thing is always kind of a controversial thing, but I will say I do like the way that how they responded to it. They're like, okay, this guy's back. Like, all right, we thought Snoke was bad. No, this dude is. Yeah, he has.
Well, and I do.
He has no,
Mm-hmm.
he has no cares about wiping out anybody. So we really got to make sure.
No, and that's what was so. See, this is why it drives me nuts in a way, because again, the story part was cool. If they had just done more, look, and I think you and I have said this a lot and are probably in complete agreement on, if they had actually established more of this stuff, like, maybe a little bit of some sort of a sequence after the opening crawl or something, or maybe it established it, I don't know, somehow. Maybe even put a little Easter egg at the end of The Last Jedi. Of course, they couldn't have done that because Palpatine wasn't even going to be around. Colin Trevorrow wasn't going to bring him back. So, it's one of those things that I think that, the way they responded and the overall scene, I thought was kind of cool. It was, sort of had that creepy, sinister, you felt the way they felt. I thought they did a good job at conveying that. But it's just, again, you're going to be tied by your own concept, though. This is part of the problem that I have, I think, is the fact that, you're bringing this stuff up, but you can't, I don't know. So, in a way, I just think they trapped themselves. So let's see. Ronaldo has a couple of comments here. So first of all, he says, yeah, I remember that comment. I'm not even sure that the race is canon. The race is canon. But the way that they were conquered and all that other stuff, that was a little bit loose. That was legendsy. I don't remember exactly what they kept from that for canon. I'm not really sure. This is my biggest issue with this movie is that it feels like we missed one film in between 8 and 9. Exactly. That's actually a really good way of putting it. Is that, yes, there should have been a movie. That's when we say they should have split this thing up into two. That, this is definitely one of the problems. And he's got another one popping up here. He says, but it also opens the door to tell more stories of Palpatine hiding. It's true. They can always go back and prequelize that, either in a novel or comic or something. And they've somewhat started to do that. But honestly, I think that you're really going to start to see this in The Mandalorian, Ahsoka, maybe if they do another Book of Boba Fett, whatever they come up with in that time period, they're going to lay the groundwork for it. All right, so our heroes are now on a mission. They're going to Pisana, which is like another desert planet because Star Wars loves its desert planets. But I like the fact that we got everybody together, because one of the things that Star Wars does in every movie is they split up the main characters. And in this one, they did.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was high time that we kind of had them all together. Because, I mean, let's see, in Force Awakens, it was kind of Poe and Finn for a second, and then it became Finn and Rey, and then you get to the Last Jedi, and then you had um everybody was kind of scattered at one point. You
Mm-hmm.
had Poe on his own mission. Finn was over with Rose running through the casino, and then you had Ray with Luke. So they really didn't have. So this is like the first time we really get to see them kind of have a mission together.
Well, not only that, Ray
And
didn't even. I mean, in the movies, Ray didn't even meet Poe until until the end of the Last Jedi.
well, yeah,
Which is one of the things that I think was nice about this whole scene in the Rise of Skywalker. They just met and they're not instant friends. It's like, look, we need you on missions. Well, you're destructive, and
but I think we pointed this out too. Like when we saw the trailer for this, we saw a scene. It wasn't this particular image, but it was another scene where it was like, wow, they're actually all three of them together. I remember
Mhm.
we made that um, observation.
Yeah, you got 3PO, you got Chewbacca. And here's another thing too. I should point this out now. 3PO is absolutely hilarious in this thing.
Oh man,
I mean, he's
priceless.
got some of the best lines that he's ever
Hmm.
had in anything. 'Cause he's kind of funny in all the movies, but I mean, he's just amazingly funny in this thing, and he has a lot to do. And that was another thing that I thought was really nice, was that
Yeah,
he
it
was an
really
integral
utilized him.
part. Yes, yes, they really utilized him. Ronaldo also loves 3PO in this thing. And then we get to the scene where, Kylo is now reassembling his mask. I like the imagery with this. I like the fact that, first of all, just even putting together the mask, it's like Kylo wants to recapture, he's truly his own guy now. He's not trying to emulate Vader anymore. He's, Snoke was the one that was like, take off that silly mask, and he got mad and destroyed it. Now he's putting it back together, but it's also showing how broken he still is, right? Because through this whole trilogy, he's always been tempted by the light side, which is another thing that I don't think gets enough credit. I don't think that they really give a lot of credit to the fact that they sort of flip this thing around to where the dark side villain is actually tempted by the light. They always had this thing to where the Jedi is tempted by the dark side. And, they
Hmm.
show a little bit of anger, and it's like, oh, anger, you're going to the dark side. Well, now you have it, you have the flip side of that, you know?
I don't think. Yeah, the only thing I didn't like about the mask I like the mask being reassembled. I thought that was cool that he's kind of going back to his original identity, to how he wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
I hate the fact that the whole like, okay, I can see why he's piecing it together. It's glowing red because he's probably got to weld some stuff together. But like afterwards, it stayed like that. I hated that.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
it
unless
kind of
he
looked
filled it in
cheesy.
with like red epoxy or something. I don't know. It's, you know,
Yeah, it just looked goofy to
I
me.
know. I know. It does. I admit it. But again, at least they had the right thing going, right? They had the right idea, I thought. Then, of course, we meet Allegiant General Pride. Now, this is a character that I thought was really cool. Harken back to the old days of the Empire. We find out later, of course, that he had actually served Palpatine in the Empire, and he's kind of in on all this stuff. So he's sort of risen. He's kind of a weird character, though, because up until this point, Hux was always the de facto leader of the military,
Hmm.
right? But now it's kind of like he seems to be under this guy, right? I mean, Pride has kind of risen to the Tarkin role almost, to Kylo's Vader.
Well, and plus with Kylo, because he and Hux have a adversarial relationship anyway, so he probably wanted to put some distance between the two of them so they wouldn't, you know, butt heads too much, and probably to tick him off along the
Yeah, I'm
way.
sure. I mean, look, there's obviously that adversarial relationship that those two guys have. And yes, absolutely. It's a situation to where pretty much, he's just kind of sticking it to Hux, more or
Hmm.
less. Um, And then, of course, in the same scene, and I thought it was cool that they had this little, first order council or whatever. But pretty much, a guy starts to question Kylo a little bit, and he just immediately shoots this guy up to the ceiling and holds him there. And, Kylo hasn't changed that much. He's still angry, but he seems a little bit more controlled in this film. I don't know if it was just me or not, but he did seem like he wasn't quite as unglued as he was in 7 and 8.
Well, once again, this is another fan service to A New Hope. I mean, this is basically the Mahdi scene.
Yeah.
So once again, more fan service. Cooler in a different way, instead of choking him, now he's doing the whole Freddy Krueger on Nightmare on Elm Street when he's like dragging him across the ceiling and stuff.
Well, but again, and I think you make a really good point here. I mean, I think the biggest issue is let's one up the original trilogy. Let's take a bunch of stuff from the original trilogy and just crank it up to 10 and give it to you that way. I don't necessarily know if that's the best thing in the world, but Ronaldo's got a couple of comments in here. He says, I like that we're talking about Kylo with his helmet. I like that he started with a full helmet copying somebody. He took off the mask because he wanted to be himself, and now it's broken because he's confused. He has no idea what or who he is. Talking about General Pride, he's a very pride person. Yeah, that didn't get lost on me either. He has a great voice. He does. And then talking about Kylo, he looked more controlled but angry at the same time. And that's probably a good way to put it, actually. It's
controlled aggression. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit more, he basically, and Ronaldo follows that up, actually. He says, not an uncontrollable anger, but a calm one. And that's the thing. I think it's more channeled in this film.
Yeah, it's almost like Bruce Banner in the Hulk at the end of the Avengers movie. He's like, my secret is I'm always angry.
Yeah.
And then he just finally just lets it go and he turns into the Hulk or something.
Yep.
It's kind of like that where Kylo is not in this. He's not so erratic in this. He's more controlled.
Controlled. Exactly. So now we get to the planet Pisana. It's obviously they go there because they find out that this is where Luke ended up, trying to find, I don't know, that Sith dagger or something. And, this is where the trail basically went cold. And so now they're picking up the whole trail or whatever. And much to their dismay, they find this whole big celebration going on. Which I actually thought was a
giant. Yeah, the festival was kind of cool.
It was cool.
Looked fun.
It looked fun. And I really like the fact that this is something different. This is something you wouldn't necessarily expect. And this is the kind of thing that would happen. How many times have they landed on a planet and it's like some small village where there's nothing going on, or I guess if you think in terms of even Earth, there's a lot of places like that you could go. But I don't know. I thought that this was actually a really nice touch. It's something that was different. And this is one of the things, again, where I was joking earlier about how they're going to beat us over the head with the fact that Rey is just Rey and that she's accepted this. You had this little, I don't know, Sanaite or whatever they are called.
Indigenous.
Yeah, an indigenous being or person or whatever. And she's asking what her family name is. And she's just basically, I'm just Rey. Because the whole idea is they're trying to show the audience, look, Rey has accepted the fact that, look, I don't come from anybody special. I'm just me. It's obviously taken its toll, but I don't know. You have any thoughts on this?
Not really. I mean, I thought the character was cute, though. I mean,
oh yeah, and the little baby versions of those things were.
Yeah, the little baby. Yeah, man, they're little cute little things.
They were adorable.
I want to as a pet.
Somebody out there, maybe even Ronaldo, probably knows the species name, and all the details. They're out there. Now this is sort of cool too. it was a little, again, you just had to roll with this, where you get this dyad in the Force thing going again between Rey and Kylo, where they're talking to each other, but now they can manifest things physically, right? So they had this whole moment where they're talking and they're trying to find out, where each other is, and now they can. It's almost like an extension of what was before, but now
Hmm.
Kylo ends up ripping this necklace off of her neck, which now he's going to go full-blown CSI on everybody, and he's going to analyze the necklace and find out what planet she's on, which actually was a smart thing for him to do.
Hmm.
I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it, and it usually depends on the day, but what are your thoughts on this whole, hey, now we can reach out and physically take things from, light years away or whatever?
Yeah, and I was gonna wait till we got to the Palpatine thing where he was talking about the whole dyad and the Force, because this whole thing, like even from Last Jedi, the fact that they could see where each other were. I mean, I get like in the Force you can see things to the future, but like they were seeing like currently, like okay, you're there, I'm here, and they're having a FaceTime conversation essentially.
Yeah,
It's just
through the
like
Force.
Star Wars version of a FaceTime through the Force. And it's like, all right, you know, what the heck? You got to explain this one, and that's that. This whole dyad and the Force um, business was interesting, but that still left a lot to um, that left us with a lot of questions, in my opinion.
Well, I mean,
And then now you're able to
that's how
snatch
they.
things off of people. It's
Well,
like, okay, well, okay, you know, at this point, like, what are we doing? Like, we're taking the fantasy thing a little bit
and
now
who's training them to do all
beyond.
this? I mean,
Yeah,
even
I
if
mean,
you
and
make
it
the
seems like it
argument,
just happens out of nowhere. Like, it's nothing that
exactly.
triggers it. It
Nope.
just happens.
Well, and I guess, and this goes back to Ronaldo's point about there should have been a movie between 8 and 9, obviously, is that they seem like they're comfortable with it now. Like, you almost wonder, have they been reaching out and talking in between, 8 and 9?
Hmm.
And have they, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense on one hand, but, you could, I guess, make that argument if you wanted to. But the thing about it that bothers me is, again, if you're going to do these things, you have to establish the rules. You have to establish the parameters by which these things are done. You can't just go, oh, well, I think we can start, you know, handing each other and taking things physically now. Because there's no real, not only is there no precedent for that, because, I mean, that would have come in real handy. Yoda could have handed Luke a couple of things when he was being, fried by the Emperor. It's or or even when he went to face Vader, or I mean, there's just not a whole lot of precedence for this. You can't even make the argument that, oh, maybe Rey just read this in the Jedi text or something, because if you do that, how does Kylo know about it? Who trained these guys to do this?
Well, you would think that, like, okay, this whole dyad thing, it's like, what did that, how does that even happen? Because you would
Well,
think that would
Snoke,
happen between.
he he basically said, "Look, I'm the one that caused it." So I can hang with that part. But again,
But
Snoke, I don't think realized they were a dyad. He just put them together to communicate and to do whatever his plan is. But as we see at the end of this film, when Palpatine's like, "Oh, this only happens once every, whatever," it's
yeah.
like, well, that's coincidence. Uh, see, Ray, Ronaldo says they should have let Ray be a nobody, and then of course they called it. He said that race is called the Yaki Yaki. See, knew he would know. He also goes on to say, in my opinion, if it was something that every single Jedi could do, I would hate it. But since it's only these two and just very few others in the history of the Jedi that can do it, I'm okay with it. And he's saying because a dyad can use it. He also thinks that we'll see this in James Mangold's movie if it happens. But I don't know, man.
Well, to me, I think a dyad would probably work better with somebody like Luke and Leia. That would have made sense because they're twins.
They're twins. They're actual descendants of the Force
And this other
itself.
Force. Yeah, I mean, that would make more sense to me if you're going to do that, especially, because I thought it was cool, even though I thought it was weird at first because we didn't know they were brother and sister yet. However, in Empire, when Luke was able to call to Leia, and Leia was like, Luke, like, okay, well, how does she know? I mean, that should have been our first clue, kind of like, well, how does she know? How does she able to talk back to him? But
that's
at
not
least that makes more sense to me though,
within
because
the
they're brother and sister,
context.
and within the context, and they're twins. Not only are they brother and sister, they're twins. And we always know, like people say, like, oh, twins can feel each other. They have a different kind of bond with each other. Whether that's really true or not. I don't know. I don't have a twin, but at least you could make an argument, and it's more plausible. But you're telling me that, okay, Palpatine created Rey's parents, and then they created Rey, and then Kylo. Come on now. It's just like, now Snoke put them together. Now he didn't put them together because this only happens every 20,000 years. I mean, it's just all over the place.
Well, and that's it. Now Ronaldo
And
makes
what the heck does a
interesting...
dyad mean anyway?
Well,
because they didn't explain that in the film.
Well, see, that's my biggest problem. Before I get to Ronaldo's comment, because he does explain how this could happen. My problem is you're not establishing the rules for what this is and how it works.
Exactly.
You're just doing it because that's what you need to do in order to further your story. That's what that looks like to me. But he says, to be fair, in this case, one is a descendant of a Skywalker and the other of a Palpatine. There is power there. So he's not really wrong in that sense.
True. However, they really don't have anything to do with each other, though.
Well, it's not even that. It's because that's true, right? Because what you were talking about was that twin bond thing. But
I mean, that's essentially kind of how they were acting, because, I mean, you've had super powerful people, I mean, like, that didn't have a dyad. It's like, all right, well, what makes them so special?
Well,
I guess maybe because...
But again,
Palpatine
you can
being the most powerful Sith Lord, maybe.
Well, that's it. And he can create life and alter midichlorians and all this other stuff. So, I mean, that, again, there's precedence for it. But even if you want to say that, I could actually hang with that. But again, you have to tell me how this happens. You have to establish the rules. Anything that happened, like when Leia was calling out, or Luke called out to Leia and she heard him, I mean, that was established. This is a force power, that people have. Obi-Wan reached out to Luke. There's Vader reached out to Luke. I mean, there was established things. You can't just bring out something this new. And I mean, I was barely on board with it in The Last Jedi. When they started, like, they're interacting with each other's environments. I mean, and again, I mean, if you just suspend the disbelief and, clear your mind, as it were, it was cool.
Right.
It was cool, and it did do its job. But yeah, if you just thought about it just a little bit, it was going to take you out. Ronaldo says, if we ever get a Knights of the Old Republic movie, do you think we'll see it with Revan and Bastila? Well, we should. If we're seeing it with Kylo and Rey, we certainly should see it with them. You guys never played the Knights of the Old Republic game. You probably have no idea what any of this means. But just understand that those two characters were, pretty bonded together. So it's just one of those things again. See, this just shows it's opening the door. But one of the things that I was happy to see, because it should have happened in The Last Jedi, was that we got Lando back.
A coherent Lando.
A coherent Lando, yeah. Not whatever we got at Celebration. So I guess if he's acting like Lando, then it works. But Billy D. Williams,
Yeah, man.
not so much. Yeah, there's something wrong. Somebody needs to check on him. But I really enjoyed his return, and I thought it was understated. I think the way they used him through the whole film was great, and I like the fact that he pointed out that he was with Luke when Luke was looking for the Wayfinder, and I thought that was a really nice touch.
Yeah, it was good to see Billy D back as Lando and is kind of doing his thing, kind of being the behind the scenes guy, but still valuable,
Mm-hmm.
with the information and things like that. And then to see him here, and then of course we see him at the end, you know, in the last section of the film, was
Mm-hmm.
really good.
Yeah. The other thing that I really like is that they talked about Ochia Bastoon. Because anybody that's been reading any of the novels, or especially the comics, within the last couple of years, knows all too well who this guy is. And the fact that it was Ochi's ship and Ochi was the one that was more or less, looking for it or had it or whatever, it was a nice Easter egg for a lot of us hardcore fans. And I think it was also nice because, look, this guy was at one point pretty much, I mean, he was a hired hand, but he was kind of like Vader's Boba Fett. Where Boba Fett was kind of like Jabba's right hand guy. Ochi,
Hmm.
he wasn't quite like Boba was, but he was basically a Jedi hunter, and he did a lot of Vader's dirty work. So I thought that was pretty cool. Um, Ronaldo says, I like that he still kept Lando's personality, but clearly more mature, and that's a good point. That he was a little bit more seasoned. Then of course we get the speeder chase, and I don't know. I mean, I thought the speeder chase was okay. I thought some of the jokes during the speeder chase were a little stupid. Um, I kind of enjoyed the whole "they fly now" thing. Thought
Yeah,
that was
that was
okay.
funny.
That was kind of funny. But the one unfunny thing, it's good job, sir. Terrible job, sir. It's like, all right, I'll let it go.
Yes.
But it was a nice action-packed chase, and
Yeah.
it gave me. It sort of almost was like a combination of the whole Tatooine thing on Return of the Jedi mixed with the speeder chase on Endor.
Mm.
As if the speeder bike chase happened on Tatooine. That's kind of what it looked like to me.
I can see that.
Because
It
he's
kind of reminded me of Rebels a little bit, though.
yeah. Well, sure. I was just trying to stick with the films, but yeah, you put
Yeah,
any
yeah.
of the animated series in it, absolutely. Then of course they fall into this what did they
Quicksand,
call it?
basically.
Yeah, it's basically quicksand. But the thing that was interesting to me about this, and was somewhat of a I guess controversial thing, was what was Ray gonna tell, or what was Finn gonna tell Ray? Because there's two schools of thought. One, which is the one that I tend to go for, he was gonna reveal that he was force sensitive, that he's been kind of feeling it for, because they've been dropping hints on that really through the whole thing, but especially in this movie. He's been kind of using the Force in an obvious way without anybody really saying anything. And then the second thing, of course, is that people think that he was going to profess his love to her or something.
I don't see how he used the Force, though.
Oh, basically, when he knew where Rey was, there was a scene there. There was a scene towards the end with Janna where he had felt something. I mean, if you really go back and watch this movie, there are all kinds of hints that he was using the Force, where he can sense certain things. They were dropping all kinds of stuff through the whole film. But
I thought it would be more the love thing, just because of of course, when the Force Awakens, he's like, the whole boyfriend thing, and
well,
then
yeah,
he wakes up after getting sliced of where's Ray. I mean, I get it. The last he saw, they were just in this battle, so he wanted to make sure she made it out. But he's been so fixated on her, every 5 minutes he's screaming her name.
I was gonna say, if you want a great drinking
it's
game,
like,
every time
dude.
he screams Ray, take a drink. You'll be,
Yeah, he plastered in like 2 minutes.
It's true. I mean, that was his big line. Him screaming Ray. That's Finn right
Yeah.
there. And then, of course, they get in there, they find the stupid dagger. Again, that was another thing that was really just driving me nuts about this movie, is the fact that there wasn't any kind of resistance or anything. I mean, just everything happened so fast and so conveniently. All these people are looking for years. They fall into some quicksand and brush a couple of things aside, and oh, look, it's the dagger. It's like, okay. I mean, I get that you're trying to move the movie along, and then, of course, they meet this serpent, and yet another force. That was freaky. I would not have just walked into this thing and been like, I feel bad for it. I was more on the Poe side of things, like, all right,
Yeah, like,
guns ready.
We need. Let's get the heck out.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's get the heck out of here.
But, of course, if Rey wasn't powerful enough as it is, now she gives us an even newer force power, which, to be fair...
One we've only seen in film.
Yeah, well...
The power existed. We've known about the power, but we've never seen it.
But honestly, it was really a Legends thing, so it wasn't really canon until now.
Well, didn't Obi-Wan use it on Luke in The New Hope? After he got attacked by the Tusken Raiders, when he found him, he kind of put his hand on his head.
Yeah, I know. There's been a lot of speculation about that. About, did he actually use the Force to heal him? Was he just seeing, does he have any serious injuries or whatever? I mean, but I know the Legends books jumped all over the Force healing thing. I mean, I would be inclined to say that, that makes sense, right? Again, that's another thing that makes sense. And I guess Rey, being that she seems to be all powerful, why not? Right? But this is the first thing, obviously, that, where we actually see it. So Ronaldo has a couple comments. Thought there was going to be a moment where Finn said to Rey, "I need to tell you something," and she said, "I know." Oh, man, I'm so glad that didn't happen.
That would have been funny.
It would have been funny.
It would have put a Han on her.
Pulled a Han, yeah. Then he says, "Is this the first and only time that we get to see a giant animal in a movie and they don't kill it?" That's... maybe.
The Wampa, the Rancor.
Well, they killed the Rancor.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, this is the thing, they don't kill it.
Yeah, this is the only time where they don't kill it. They heal it.
Right.
He says, "We saw that power in The Mandalorian first. Grogu used it. Thing is, The Mandalorian came after The Rise of Skywalker. So we did not see that first in The Mandalorian." Says, "The convenience Eric reference sounds like every beautiful, bold, and brave, overpowered female character." Yeah, I mean, and that's been an age-old thing when it comes to Rey. Is she the Mary Sue of Star Wars, right? Is she, really overpowered? I would say definitely for where she's at. I mean, the fact that they basically explain that she's a Palpatine at least gives you some credibility there. But don't forget that if J.J. Abrams hadn't taken over The Rise of Skywalker, there would not have been a Palpatine. In fact, I think in Trevorrow's version, she was even more powerful. But, speaking of no big payoffs, we meet the Knights of Ren finally.
Oh, my goodness.
And here's, again...
These guys.
This is another... And if you read about these guys in the comics, like all the comic stuff leading up to this, and I'm talking about stuff that came out even... So wait, Ronaldo says that he remembers The Mandalorian ended before Episode 9 was released.
No.
Episode 9 came out in like 2017 or no, 2019. So Mandalorian premiered in like, I mean, you know what it
21.
is? I know what he's thinking of. I think it did. I think it actually did premiere like 2 months before The Rise of Skywalker opened. So, in that sense, while The Rise of Skywalker was being made, you might be able to make that argument that we do see it for. But remember, it was a weekly series. So, the episode where Grogu actually healed, I think, came after The Rise of Skywalker was released, technically. Had to look that up. But yeah, these guys, they're so fearsome in the comics, and they were so cool and so multi-dimensional. And really, all we get to do is see these guys stand around, except for the very end.
Right.
Let me get to some of these comments here. David said, I hated that scene where the greatest of all time said she was his granddaughter. She's unworthy. Yeah, I guess that would actually hold extra special. Ronaldo says, don't even mention the Knights of Ren.
I know, man. Like they were once again, another great addition, but they were just wasted. Much like Phasma, much like Benicio del Toro. Just
Well, you know what makes it even worse is the fact that, again, these guys were established as really amazing characters in the other medium. So now we have these expectations. It's almost like the best that I can compare it to, and at least we had a little bit before that, was Boba Fett in Return of the Jedi when it's slapstick and he's, and like hitting the wall and falling into. It's like, okay, that's not really the Boba Fett that we imagined. We were hoping for this big showdown between him and Han Solo. We thought we were going to get it, too. Until it turned into, like a Chevy Chase film. All right. So now, of course, while all this is ensuing, Chewbacca ends up being captured along with the dagger. And I thought this was kind of nice, too. I actually didn't expect this to happen, to be honest.
Yeah, me either.
I thought that was a little bit, movie that basically completely lacks suspense because our characters didn't have to overcome very much. It's like anytime they sought after something, they just kind of like found it in like 2 minutes. But this was one of those points where, no, this added a little bit of tension to it. And then you get this, again, it was spectacular. But, I don't know. I was warming up to it a little bit because, okay, Rey, she's had the text, she's practiced, she's already possessed a little bit of acrobatics anyway, being that she was a scavenger and she was a fighter. I just still have issues with where she's at in such a short period of time. But it was cool. I mean, don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah, it was a phenomenal scene. I mean, I think even when I saw this in the trailer, I thought this was like, all right.
Well, the only problem is, and don't get me wrong, I mean, I actually like the lightsaber duel a lot. I think it was like the second best duel maybe in the entire sequel trilogy, but it's nice to see Rey and Kylo be a little bit more of a threat to each other, It's like, on one hand, it probably would have been, even though it would have been a little bit more realistic, it might have been a little bit more annoying if, it's just like she's still a student learning, I mean, it's kind of like, okay, let's see a movie where we get somebody fully fledged. And enough time did pass between it wasn't like this thing took place like a month later or something. I don't actually recall the amount of time. I think it was a couple of years, but I could be wrong. And this of course is a scene that I actually really enjoyed a
Oh
lot.
man, that was sweet, and it was so freaky.
It was. And I like the fact that it came from she was just straining because at this point, she was just using the force. And this was spectacular too, because this is something we've seen in video games and all this, and it's about time we finally saw this in a movie, right? Ship takes off. She's using the force to basically hold it there. Now, as an added bonus, Kylo somehow escaped that fireball that was the crash of his TIE interceptor. And he kind of looks at what she's doing. I love the way he just did it. He kind of looks at her and all that, and then he goes, I think I'm gonna take it away from you. And so having this tug of war. And what I liked was she was basically straining. She was using the force, but she inadvertently used force lightning and destroyed this transport, which of course we're led to believe Chewbacca was on. And
Well, yeah, I love the fact that Kylo was testing her. I love that part about it too.
you think that's what it was?
I think that's what he said. He said, he was testing to see if, what was really, how powerful she was and what was really in her.
Well, it's true because
And
he knew her lineage by this point.
yeah, he knew who she was, and he
Mhm.
knew, he was just trying to, see how strong and how powerful she really
Yeah,
was.
like kind of where she's at. I mean, that makes sense, but he did not expect the force lightning because look at his face
No.
and like how he kind of jumped back, like, oh crap. It's like, uh, I love that, man. I thought that was a spectacular thing where, he was freaked out. Kind of remind me of how Gideon looked when he saw Skywalker at the end of The Mandalorian.
Mhm.
It's like, uh-oh. He just kind of like sort of walks away. I thought that was really cool. But yeah, this is a spectacular scene. And then, of course, Rey's feeling remorse. And I really liked, this is one of the rare moments. There's only a couple of them in this whole film where it slows down enough for our characters to actually experience something.
Right. I love the fact that she felt remorse because it's like, okay, she's been so kind of hell bent on being powerful and trying to, get to that point, but there's a responsibility that comes with it, and she realized she doesn't have as much control as she thought she did, and it kind of humbles her yet again.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that was one of the nice things. And also, she's basically, and she spends in a couple of scenes basically saying, everybody thinks they know me. No, you don't really know who I am. I mean, I thought that was really cool. And of course, what would a Star Wars film be without a new cute droid or something? But, Dio didn't really catch on. Like
No, 'cause
BB-8 and
he really didn't do anything.
well, that's true. But I mean, he was kind of cute with the whole, hey, I've been abused. I'm fearful.
Once again, it's like an abused droid. Like,
I know.
I
know.
all right.
I get it. Look, I'm right there with you. It's bad, stupid writing. And yeah, I don't know. I think they're just, and here's the thing, and this is probably something you can get on board too. He was unnecessary. There was no reason to introduce
no
this
reason
droid
for him
into it.
Exactly. Like especially if he served no purpose. At least BB-8 was, Poe's droid that kind of became Ray's droid too, and they kind of shared them in a way. And then BB-8 was able to help him get out of stuff. He became like the little R2 of this generation of characters, right?
Yep.
So when Dio rolls in, literally, like it's like, okay, you got a little Slurpee cup on top and a wheel.
Yeah, right. Like a little
Who
cone
the heck
or
cares?
something. I mean,
it's like,
this is just, if they just had a scene where, BB-8 had just found him or whatever, fine. But this was really stupid. But, of course, we go down to Kijimi City. And this actually had kind of a Wizard of Oz vibe to it to me. Because if you watch The Wizard of Oz when they invade the witch's castle, you know, they're all kind of like disguised, and the Tin Man is even wearing like a cloak and all that. And you got 3PO wearing a cloak, and they're sort of sneaking around trying to infiltrate this. But I actually like this scene a lot because this is the first time, because remember, this is before The Mandalorian really took hold, before Andor, before a lot of these series that really showed the brutality of the Empire, or in this case, the First Order. This is really showing you the brutality, like how the First Order is treating the citizens, how fascist it is, how, just really crazy it is to be in a city that's pretty much occupied by this overwhelming fascist force,
Yeah, I mean, it kind of had this weird I don't know, kind of had a, like, you know how like in the James Bond movies when they'll go like to Russia or something like that, and he's kind of sneaking. That's what it kind of reminded me of a little bit.
I can see that. I mean, the other thing I liked about it too was it was a different setting. I just overall thought it was a really nice sequence. I also like the fact, this is another thing that they kept doing through this whole thing, right? Where they keep finding out more about Poe's background. And, Finn's like, because everybody's like, well, how do you know how to do this? And how do you know how to do, like back in Pisana, he hot-wired some speeder. And Finn's like, well, how do you even know how to do that? Then they find out later on that he's a spice runner.
Life.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny how, I really love the line when, Finn keeps hammering him like, really, a spice runner? And Poe turns around and goes, dude, you were like a stormtrooper.
Yeah, like, shut up.
I mean, I thought that was awesome. I thought that was
like
like
you're one to judge.
Yeah, like you really want to go there? I mean, that was incredible. And then, of course, we meet Zori Bliss. Now, Zori Bliss is another character, again, I think had a lot of promise. I liked what I saw of her. But again, I mean, it was...
She's like a Power Ranger or a member of Daft Punk.
Yeah. Yeah, somebody that would be definitely... I'll tell you this. When I actually saw her, it was almost like she belonged in a different sci-fi film.
Mm-hmm.
But the character, though, I thought the character itself was nice, and it was kind of a nice juxtaposition with Poe too, because she basically illuminated another side of Poe.
Yeah,
they basically just used as like a narrative device, right? They used Zori's character to reveal things about Poe. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, which I thought that was a nice touch, honestly. And then, there's that scene, excuse me, between Zori and Poe. And I like the fact that we see her eyes. I like the fact she never took off her helmet.
I know, she must be Mandalorian.
I know, right? This is the way. But
man, she would have said that, I would have lost it.
Oh, man, that would have been great. But again, this is one of probably the best of the quietest moments, and believe me, there weren't many in this film, where the movie actually slows down, breathes a little bit, the audience has a little bit of a chance. I mean, it's almost kind of like intermission. But I thought that was really nice, let's see. So Ronaldo says Babu Frick was great. Yep, he was. And then he's talking about Dio's introduction. He says, "Oh, there's a reason. Sell toys."
Right. There
that backfired too. He says he likes. He says he likes Dio though. And then he goes on to say, "I like how general audience in my theater laughed when they heard Spice Runner, even though as Star Wars fans know that he was basically a drug dealer."
Yep.
Yeah.
Or a mule, basically. I'm more so like, I'm not dealing the drugs, but I'm more so just transporting them.
Yeah, right. And then, of course, we get 3PO's whole Sith translation. This I thought was pretty cool. And now I remember when this
The whole
popped
red
up
eye
in the trailer.
thing,
Yeah,
man.
we were
Yeah, we were like
speculating. We
freaking
were
out.
like, "Ooh, what's up with this?"
Heck,
And
they
this
do with
went
3PO.
beyond. Yeah, we went beyond his whole red arm thing from the
Hmm.
Force Awakens. This was, but when they actually hooked him up, and again, preceding the scene, I mean, I have to say, I think 3PO actually had some of the best moments in this film. That whole thing where, they're like, well, what are you
Yeah,
doing? And he's like, taking a last look at my friends. I mean, I actually had tears in my eyes when I saw that in the theater.
yeah. I mean, the thing about 3PO is that he this kind of became his movie in a
Yeah.
lightweight kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you got really a lot of payoff for him because we're so used to seeing R2 save the day in the prequels and even in the original trilogy, but this is the time where we actually see, like, outside of Endor. I mean, 3PO is just kind of almost in the way of a lot of people, but this time he's actually it's essential to a mission,
Yep.
and I thought that was a really good twist and really cool for them to put that in there, especially for Anthony Daniels.
Well, and there's the other thing too, right? Where they had all these different. I mean, there was either he had some really funny lines, or there were funny lines about him. Like when they first brought up the whole idea of the Sith translation, and Poe's like, "What? You speak like 6 million some forms of communication. You can't do
Communication,
this." I mean, and some 3PO's like, "Nah, I can translate it. I can't say it. Like I know what it says."
right? But it's against my programming. That's what it was.
Yeah. Now you
I
gotta
always
wonder
love
who
when,
did
like,
that.
I always love the fact that um, like when they're actually making fun of him and he kind of realizes, he catches on. He does that little turn, like, "Wait, are you talking about me?" type thing.
Well, there was a couple other moments too, right? Like there was the one where they're all like turning around, I think on Pisana, and looking at him, and then he's turns around too because he's like, "What's
Yeah,
everybody
yeah.
looking
It's
at?"
like, right,
The other one was
like
when they
his
fall through that sinkhole, and he's like, "Well, you didn't call my name out, but I'm fine." That
yeah,
was.
right, man. That was awesome. That was a hilarious.
I mean, he just had
Forgot
some
about
really.
that, but yeah,
Yeah, he had
that
some
was
great
hilarious.
lines in it, man. I mean, he just, like you said, this is in a lot of ways, this was his movie. So I really enjoyed that moment, and I thought it was cool. And I also like, even after he loses his memory, right? Because obviously they had to wipe his memory in order to get this translation. That was part of the whole process. It's great when he's referring, "Oh, Babu Frick, he's one of my oldest friends," or whatever. I mean,
Right,
there's
yeah.
just a lot
He
of
just
really
met him like
cool
2 seconds
humor.
ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Well, of course, they end up on a rescue mission for Chewbacca, of course, which was kind of
Hmm.
nice. But again, so I don't want to give the impression that I wasn't entertained and I didn't enjoy it. I enjoyed watching this movie. It was a fun movie. It was cool. But I mean, look, we're analyzing it. This isn't about just watching it. We're actually analyzing the film. And if we're going to analyze it correctly, we have to point these things out. And this is another thing, they're going through this Star Destroyer or whatever, and they're just mowing down anybody that gets, like, there's no resistance really. It's, you know what I mean? You don't
Yeah.
really feel any sense of danger through this entire thing.
Well, that's the thing. It's I think because, like I said, you have to get to so much stuff. You can't have them stopped up by anything. Because
Hmm.
and this goes back to what we've been saying all along. Like, it should have been 2 movies, so that way you can have those moments where, okay, things slow down, they can get stopped and get out of things or be left on a cliffhanger. And, now we have to, tune in next week basically for the exciting conclusion of, it's, we could have had that moment and it would have been fine. 'Cause like I
Either
said,
that, they could have done one of two things. They could have either done that, or they could have just trimmed the fat.
True.
Get rid of a lot of the unnecessary scenes. There's a lot of them.
Deal.
Yeah, just to name a few. I mean, these guys were kind of cool. I have to admit, when it's kind of like, we're glad we're here. Oh man, thank goodness you're here. I mean, they sounded like they were surfers or something. I mean, I don't know. In some ways, some of this stuff bothered me. Just so much. And that's where I kept going back and forth. Overall, yes, I enjoyed the movie. It was fun. I established that. But man, there's just so many things that bothered me about this one. And then, of course, you get this, and this gets back into this dyad thing that we were talking about. She's basically in his quarters. He's on the planet trying to figure out where she is. They start talking, and they sort of see each other, hear each other, but they see each other in their environment. So Kylo basically sees her, but on the planet, but he has no idea where she is.
Mm-hmm.
And she sees him and all this other stuff, right? So obviously he gets the clue once they knock over Vader's helmet and it shatters in front of Kylo on the planet somehow. How does that happen? It wasn't like, she was doing anything with it, like handing it off or anything like that. It just falls on the floor and he happens to see it because of this overlapping weird force connection that they just can't seem to explain. Well, whatever. And so later on, of course, he knows exactly where she is and he ends up confronting her. And that's when he reveals that she's a Palpatine. And that part I actually thought was cool.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of always makes you wonder too, like, were they really fighting each other, or was it like kind of a? I mean, I know because the whole diet thing, we already established that they can touch each other. It sounds bad, but
hey, man, no shirtless scenes in this one.
I know, right? Thank you. Yeah, they can, have physical contact with each other between. Well, they're not in the same space.
Mm-hmm.
So, but now it just seems like, okay, like I could just project myself into a room with you now. It's all of a sudden like, okay, well, you wanted to know where she was. You could just, could just, you didn't need to wait for the mask to drop. You could have just jumped there in the first place.
Well, that's how
That's
he
what I'm
knew,
saying.
though.
Like,
That's how he knew that she was there. He didn't actually know where she was. It was when the mask dropped and fell on the floor because he knew that the mask was in his quarters. He knew that that's where she was. He took his ship, he flew to the Star Destroyer, and then he ended up, for real, confronting her.
oh, for some reason I thought he did that in the Force.
So you didn't watch the movie before this review.
No, but I have a very well. I mean,
apparently not.
Okay, one moment. Okay, let's not do this, Eric. One moment. Okay.
Red flag.
But right, all right. My first penalty of the game.
Yeah,
like the third quarter.
Oh, you're very optimistic.
Well, I didn't say we're in the third quarter.
Oh,
I didn't say
okay, yeah.
the third quarter. It's really bad after halftime at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Well, actually, we are. We're at about halftime, slide wise. Uh-oh, the gauntlet's being thrown. Where is it? I am just me.
Smart to say.
Daryl didn't do his homework.
I'm sorry, I've graduated. Thank you very much.
Yeah. But I mean, the thing is, though,
that's why we're teaching the show. See?
Right, exactly. Yeah, right. See, teachers don't have to do homework.
Exactly. You just have to grade.
But I mean, when he actually revealed it to her, though, I thought that part was handled well. And that's really my problem with this entire film. If you have to sum of this up, is they'll do one thing really nice and really right, and then they'll just, I don't know, lose their way on a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the lot in um this particular film. You got good and you got the. I mean, it's kind of like the forest, really. You got the good and the bad, right? But
It's the dark side of the movie, right?
yeah, you got some really good moments where you're just like, okay, that was cool. I really enjoyed that, or but then there's some things it's just like, okay, this is kind of ridiculous, or where did this come from? And it kind of put like this movie's supposed to end all the questions, not create more.
Exactly.
So
Yeah, that's a good point,
um
actually. I mean, there's a lot of times where if it doesn't outright do that, it almost does. And there's times where it either does something well or kind of good, or maybe it's kind of like, I don't know about that. Or sometimes, yeah, it just completely pulls you out of the film. And that's the bad part. But one thing they did get right was this whole scene where, obviously one of the things that I thought was cool, it was a little rushed, but when Hux basically has those stormtroopers, and I thought it was funny that Finn and Poe were arguing even though they were about to get shot. That whole scene I thought was pretty cool. And then, when Hux basically reveals himself to be the mole, that was completely unexpected. He's like the last guy I would have expected to be the mole.
yeah, it's the last guy that you expect, but then when you think about it, you can't expect it because
Exactly.
of how much he hates Kylo.
Yep. It makes
So it's like
perfect sense.
I rather I rather the resistance win than let this idiot, basically run us. So,
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
you know, so that was kind of hilarious to me.
Right. When he's basically like, I don't care if you win, I just want Kylo to lose. But
Right.
the only thing that was a little weird to me about that, though, was if you look at who he was in episode 7, and maybe that's showing growth on Hux's part, because in
Hmm.
episode 7, The Force Awakens, he was totally drinking the Kool-Aid, man. He was, he's like yelling during that speech and spitting, and I mean, he really believed in the First Order. And I think when Starkiller Base went and then Snoke was killed and Kylo took over, it's kind of like, you know what? This is not the First Order that I signed up for.
Yeah.
And so now it's time for it to go. And I honestly thought that was pretty cool too. Um Ronaldo says, what I like about this film is that it's just fun. Not perfect, but very, very fun. It feels like Jedi Fallen Order, and again, I love when Star Wars feels like a video game. See, I can hang with that, except for the fact that Star Wars, when Lucas created the original trilogy, he set the bar high. You had an extremely good film, right? Like, it's regarded as some of the best movies. And it sets the bar very high, and it shows you that you can have a fun movie, but at the same time, it can also be a good movie. Whereas the sequel trilogy, I don't know, it just kind of lost its way.
Yeah. And once again, it just suffers from not having a plan, not really executing, and it's just rushing things just to put it out. And I mean, it suffers. I mean, and that's with anything, whether it's a movie, whether it's music, when people put out albums, like you can tell when people just kind of like, okay, I'm trying to capitalize on something.
Hmm.
Um, it's just not even like a meal. Like you could tell when people just, you go to a fast food place and you could tell they just slap the thing together.
Oh, yeah.
They really they didn't care about it. It's just like, all right, just let's meet the quota of getting it out in 2 minutes or less or
Pretty
something like that.
much. Yeah.
And that's unfortunately you can feel that as a fan and as um a moviegoer because you don't even have to understand a whole lot about film or the film making process, but you've been in good movies and you know what it's supposed to feel like.
Yeah. No, it's very well said, because that's really, I think that sums up the whole point. Ronaldo goes on to say, I didn't expect it, meaning Hux being the mole, but it makes sense for Hux's character. Very much. He says, at this episode, I feel like Hux realized that everything will get worse with Kylo. If it was bad with Snoke, imagine with Kylo, who actually hates him. And that's the thing. He was aligned really with Snoke. he hated Kylo. He was, I mean, don't forget, he tried to kill him. And
Right.
which was actually one of the funniest moments, he kind of like kills him and kind of moves, he just kind of casually puts
that
the gun back
behind his coat.
Yeah. Ronaldo says, because Snoke saw him as a useful pawn, Kylo thinks he's just useless. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And then David says, I don't know where this movie falls chronologically. In real life, was this supposed to be the finale to the 9 movies? And Daryl should be a student again for his bad Batman analysis. Oh, those are... I will defend to his death the Batman analysis. That was spot on.
Remember, David, you need me. That's all I'm gonna say.
we already got like a gazillion slides we got to get through. We can't get off on that now.
Exactly. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Ronaldo says, "Ouch." But here's the thing. Chronologically, yes, this is the final. This is episode 9. This is the one that's supposed to wrap up. Now, I don't know if when they make the Rey movies and all that, are they going to technically call it episode 10? Who knows? I don't even think they do. I hope not either, because this is supposed to be the Skywalker saga.
Wrap up. Yeah.
And this would be, I mean, if anything, if they wanted to create a different saga, it should go back to an episode 1. Episode 1, whatever it's going to be called. If they want to do it that way. Or, I mean, in my opinion, honestly, they should just not do episode numbers. Although they are going to do the opening crawl. That part's cool. But all right, so then, Rey and Kylo just, after their duel or whatever, this was really interesting to me. This is very much, to me, a mirror of that Empire Strikes Back scene between Vader and Luke.
Yep.
He's calling to, look, you want to take my hand, reach out, we can do this. She's standing by the edge of the hangar. It's basically another, I'll never join you. Well, you don't have a choice. And then she just kind of jumps out and, obviously the Falcon's there to get her after she leaps pretty far, actually, to the Falcon's platform. But I thought this was great because it was different. It wasn't like a ripoff or anything like that. It was very much an homage to that scene, but it fit very well story-wise to me.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, once again, when they do shades of the original trilogy, at times it really is very well done and poignant. But and this happens to be one of those moments, that was always a very, I think that's a lot of people's favorite space of dialogue, that conversation between Luke and Vader, and they're just like, I'll never join you if you only knew the power of the dark side. Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father. He told me enough. It's just like you felt that tension in that moment, and that's what we needed. Because throughout this movie, we kept saying that there wasn't a lot of time for tension. You didn't feel like our heroes were really in danger because everything was happening at basically light speed, if I could use that. So for this moment to actually happen, and like you said, giving that homage to Empire, it felt organic.
Well, not only that brings up a good point, though, because The Empire Strikes Back, that was the scene where Vader got to tell his side of the story. Because Obi-Wan up until that point had been saying, hey, here's what happened to your dad, all this other stuff. And Vader's like, Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father. It's like, yeah, he told me enough. Vader's like, no. Here's my side of it.
I bet he didn't tell you this part.
Right. Exactly. He didn't tell you this part. Here's why. You know what? If you join me, we can overthrow the Emperor. I don't care about him. We could do this. He's actually offering a different perspective on things. And, an opportunity maybe. Hey, you know what? I wasn't there for your childhood, but what do you say I become that father to you and we rule the galaxy kind of thing? And that's sort of
what you got to do this Force thing.
Yeah. And this is what Kylo is doing in a way too, because notice he took off the mask again. You know, I really like the fact that you could tell through the whole film that, and really you can even argue through the whole sequel trilogy, but especially in this movie, he always makes all these things like, well, why don't you just come back? He's like, well, I can't. It's too late. It's almost like he's not saying it because he doesn't want to. He almost feels like he's just trapped in this. He has to see it through now because he already
He's
crossed the
too far
point of no
gone.
return. Yeah.
Yeah.
Once he killed his dad, it was like, well, that's it. And I think that them playing with that and the way that Adam Driver pulled that off, I thought, yeah, that was spectacular. But speaking of, convenience, so then they go, I forgot what this planet was called, but they go to this other planet. It's one of the moons of Endor. It's like the ocean moon of Endor, which I thought this was a nice touch. They go to the thing where the Death Star is. She's holding up the dagger and, finding the location of this other wayfinder. It's like, really?
Right. Like you just know how to use this thing out of.
How
the
to
Force
use
is so
it.
convenient. That's all I can say. The Force makes things very convenient.
I mean, and you just happen to crash land. Mind you, they crash landed. You crash landed at the right spot. You suddenly, like you said, just know how to use this thing. And you're in the right spot with where the Death Star is that you can hold it. I mean, the whole time my head was exploding while I was watching it. Again, I was enjoying it. Right. It may not sound like it from the tone of my voice, but I actually was. There was like two different parts of me. I was very schizophrenic when I was watching this. My apologies to anybody who suffers from schizophrenia, but I was really schizophrenic during this. Where part of me was like, yeah, man, this is really cool. Man. Oh, sweet, the Death Star. Oh, I'm having such a good time. And the other part of me is going, this is so stupid. I can't believe they actually put this. Are these even professional writers at this point? So.
Right. And once again, had this been split up into two movies, I think they would have had a chance to explore that.
Yeah, and again,
been like, oh, what is that? Oh, it's the Death Star. Like there'd have been a lot more of exposition that could have taken place within this.
Yes. Lots of exposition. Well, I mean, and again, I don't think either one of us are saying, look, let's just cram dialogue in for the sake of dialogue. But, let's maybe have a well-paced film that hits all the beats. Or
see, the dialogue breaks up. It allows you to keep a certain pace because things aren't getting out of hand too quickly. It allows you to kind of almost like reset in a way without disturbing a rhythm.
Right. I mean, there was a lot, because if you think about A New Hope was actually, well, the pacing was really kind of start and stop, right? You had some more high action scenes, maybe some more fast-paced stuff, and then it would slow down. And then it would pick up, and then it would slow down. The Empire Strikes Back was very much the same way. You had times where it picked up the pace, times where, because again, whenever anybody criticizes the pacing of a film, nobody's saying that a film should be evenly paced throughout the entire duration of it, unless that's what's called for. But what it is that, you have a little bit of start, you pull back a little bit. You have a little bit more, you pull back a little bit. This thing, I mean, it was just right from the beginning, man, just pedal to the metal,
Yeah.
And like you said, a lot of things suffered. You're right. I mean, if you could have just taken the time to explore stuff. And again, not to beat a dead tauntaun here, but if you just either split it up into two films, or if you didn't want to do that and keep the trilogy format, then just trim the fat, D.O. Well, I mean, here's another one, Janna. Now, the Janna character, is another. I think you could almost say she was wasted as well.
Absolutely.
And because I enjoyed the fact that when her and Finn started talking and you found out she was also a former stormtrooper and like her whole gang was, and they all defected. And
Yeah, that was cool.
there was story there. It's like, well, let's
Absolutely.
explore that. I mean, we even go back to when we were talking about episode 7 about Finn. You have a stormtrooper who essentially defected, joined essentially the rebellion, in this case it's the resistance, is having issues about running away. There's so many things they could have explored in that, and they didn't. And it's the same thing with Janna. Janna was actually a cool character.
Well, that's what
But-
made Andor such a great show, was because they really explored that.
Mhm.
Like, how Andor, used to be a part of that little, when he was like a little kid and he's part of that little tribe. And then, it's like we start to see the evolution. It's like, okay, yeah, I've been in camps before. I've been in this type of stuff before, and I'll do what I need to do to survive. And he hates the Empire just like everybody, you know what I mean? And that's what I'm saying. Like, if you'd had a little bit more, not as much as Andor, but just a little bit more of that,
Yeah,
it would have gone a long way.
exactly, to where you can explore some of these story beats. Because again, I mean, they do this so much where they'll introduce somebody really cool and then, you got nothing. So Ronaldo says, oh, well, here, we'll start with David first. I don't want to deprive him of this one. He says, these people should have helped write Andor to help moving along. If you guys really want to see some fun viewing, you have to go back and see Daryl and I at times pleading and at other times arguing with David during our Andor reviews.
David just likes to be the devil's advocate and the cantankerous one. Probably should add him to the show just to add that. Like, he's like the Simon Cowell of.
Well, every show needs one. Although I think today we're all basically Simon Cowells, right? Ronaldo says that's something that actually felt good to me. The pacing was good. Well, I guess it depends on really what you're looking for. If you're looking for like this nonstop action adventure, then absolutely. Again, I enjoyed it. You might not always know that from the comments we're making, but again, I mean, I can enjoy the film from a subjective point of view, but objectively, I can criticize everything that's wrong with it. I Am Just Me is basically saying, Janna, love her. And then beating a dead horse. Should have been 2 movies. Yeah, well, and I mean, that's the thing. And again, it's too bad because, look, you had this yet another scene. It kind of reminded me of the whole Zori Bliss thing where between Zori and Poe, now you had this quiet scene between Janna and Finn. Ronaldo's like, are you sure you enjoyed it? Yes. It was a fun movie.
I think Janna was a phenomenal, is a cool character. But we didn't get a chance to really do too much with her, unfortunately. Like, I figured if they would have brought her in maybe early in the film, then maybe. But at this juncture in the film, it's kind of like we're almost home, So is it really necessary to start trying to bring in a new character who has a great storyline? But it's like we don't have enough time in the rest of the film to actually explore that. So either put her early in the film so we can delve into it, or just don't have the character at all.
Exactly. Well, speaking of almost home, so we have one more person watching this show than we have likes right now. So one of y'all hasn't clicked the like button. And honestly, besides the fact that, look, it hasn't, yes, it helps the channel and the algorithm and all that, but guys, it's driving my OCD nuts. I need to see the equal thing here. somebody, whoever it is, whichever one of you has not yet clicked the like button. And hey, if you're watching after the effect, there it is. Thank you. Just thought I'd get that out of the way now. You know, nobody has to cop to it in the chat. I'm just saying, it's, you know, we're all good. All is right with the world. Let's move on.
Everyone's paid their taxes.
Exactly. Ronaldo says you need to see both sides balance. Exactly.
Right.
You know,
render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. And
there you go. As you know, as viewers rise, likes rise up to meet it.
Oh, you did not.
I did. He's like, you used a Jedi mind trick on him. Well, maybe. And trust me, if I was doing that,
it's more like a force push. But
right. All right. So now we get this thing with Rey on the Death Star. This is another thing. Again, you know, she goes off on this skiff or whatever that's barely holding on. Now she's suddenly a navigator that can navigate treacherous waters. You know, even though you have Jana and her whole team who were experienced, who said, listen, you trust me, you need to wait. And I love the effects of it too, because as Rey was going to the Death Star, you really felt, this is one of the few times I think in the whole film that you actually felt a sense of danger. You know, it was like perfect storm out there.
Literally.
But again, I let it go. I'm like, okay, Rey apparently can do anything, right? I mean, why not be able to sail across treacherous waters, even though she grew up on a desert planet? That's okay. I'm okay.
You're not mad, are you?
Not mad at all. I'm smiling through the pain, everybody. Smiling through the pain.
I never thought about that, but that is such a valid point.
Right?
Like, you grew up on a desert planet. Like, but you know,
I'm okay. So she's on the Death Star, which of course she just happens to, you know, get in the throne room. And, you know, again, I mean, this I think was a little bit of fan service. And then there was that one little, I don't know how I feel about this either. There was that one little corridor that opens that, I mean, I don't even know if this was, I remember watching Return of the Jedi several times. I don't remember some little chamber off to the side. But again,
yeah,
you know, whatever, right? And, you know, that basically opens up. Let's see, do I have the, yes. And then, of course, she confronts Dark Rey. Now, this was actually cool. This was something that I really enjoyed. And again, it really falls to the whole, I wish they had done more with this.
Yeah, Dark Rey was really cool. I was trying to figure out, like, okay, where were they going? Where were they going with this? Is this supposed to be like another failure at the cave type situation? Like, was that little back room just imbued with the dark side of the Force, and you know, like, or is Palpatine's spirit still lurking in there? Because clearly he's on Exegol, so you know,
the answer is yes, right? Because who knows? Could be all those things.
That's what I'm saying. It was cool, but you know, there's some things, like I said, they put in the trilogy where I was kind of like, that's not all the way working for me. Much like your moment where she's grown up on a desert planet, but she knows how to sail a boat now. But the other thing is, like, okay, now you can touch things and they hold memories now. Like, you grasp a lightsaber and now you get flashbacks to where it's been. I'm like, okay, where did this come from?
I did like when Dark Rey like kind of hissed and had those like weird fangs or whatever.
Fangs, yeah,
that was cool.
I mean, don't even it was a cool looking scene. In fact, that she had like the double blade thing, that was pretty sweet.
Where it kind of did the whole, you know, yeah. I mean,
kind of.
There was a lot of really cool elements to that. David, I'm sorry, says, I think Daryl does this. Are you sure that your description of the movie isn't better than the actual movie is? if your objective view of the film is more negative, is not the movie reflective of that? No. Because
Please
again,
explain it to him because I've tried. So
there are two different things, right? And I do this in music all the time. And this is what art is part subjective, part objective. It's part
Mhm.
creative, part science. Okay? So one of the things that people like to say, and this is true in movies and it's especially true in music, is that you'll hear stupid things like there's only two types of music. Music that you like and music that you don't. You know, there's no such thing as good or bad because it's art. All right. You see this all the time. But there is a science to this. There are things that you can objectively rank, rate, whatever. Like for instance, if we go into a music thing, there have been times where I've heard a song and I'll say, technically this song is amazing, but doesn't really do anything for me. I don't like it. But yet, I acknowledge that it's fantastic. Same thing is true opposite, right? I mean, there's some times where it's like, okay, this music is horrible. It's got like two chords and it's terrible. It's poorly written. Obviously the people, but there's like an energy to it. There's something to it that it just does something, and so therefore I like it. And that's kind of the way that movies are. In the case of this film, there are things that I enjoyed about it because when I was looking at this as a moviegoer and purely just taking it in, I'm like, okay, this is fun. This is cool. It's hitting a little bit of fan service. It was visually striking. There is enough good writing, and we did point this out earlier, that there were some really good concepts. Again, Star Wars is notorious for this, where they'll have a really good concept and then the execution's bad. So, from a movies goer standpoint, when I saw it, and even when I watched it a couple of days ago, I'm like, okay, it's fun. I liked it. However, if I'm going back and I'm critiquing the film, right? If I'm really critiquing it, now I have to look at it objectively. And this is the same thing that you can even say about YouTube videos, where, they always tell you content is king, right? You get these guys that shoot YouTube videos on a phone, and they, the audio's not that great. I mean, if you were to grade it objectively, you'd say, well, the production value is not that good or whatever, but the content's cool. So you might watch it. You're going to overlook a lot of things because you like the content. And so that's really where we're coming from with this whole What is Star Wars series. That's why we decided to do this, was because, one, we never really reviewed all the films, because we started the show like when The Last Jedi came out, I think. So when Daryl basically said, hey, let's go back, let's talk about what makes Star Wars Star Wars, then you can do it. Now, Ronaldo brings up a good point, because he says, isn't a criticism subjective? That depends. See, the thing is, we're actually in this industry. We make videos for a living, like not like YouTube videos. I mean, like an actual industry. I've worked on short films before. I've had the opportunity to work on feature films. I mean, if I had known the Avid system better, I could have been an assistant editor on one of the Transformers movies. So I know a lot of guys that worked on the Batman versus Superman films. I'm in the industry. So it's not subjective, because I actually understand the rules of filmmaking. I know what I'm talking about. I'm not some guy who's just has an opinion on something. You would be correct if that was the case. I used to teach this. So that's where that part comes in. So when you're going through and you're actually doing that stuff. But, again, this is where it's subjective. Everybody, just because that's one of the things that makes this thing so amazing, is that everybody likes different things. Everybody, even if you like a movie, like let's just say everybody loved a particular film, right? We can actually, that doesn't mean that everybody liked the same things. You know, Daryl might like, we've run into this a lot. You guys will see that in action when we review Visions on May 4th, starting or whenever that is, right? Because I like Visions more than he does, which, you know, I mean, and I admit all the problems with it, but I ended up liking a lot about it. And so, you know, Daryl didn't. And even some of the ones that Daryl did like, there was a couple of things where, and this has happened actually even when we reviewed stuff like The Bad Batch or whatever, is that we'll basically like, we'll say, okay, we like this episode, but then we'll find out that we actually like different aspects of it. Like there were certain things that Daryl liked, and there were other things that I liked. And maybe some of the things I liked, he didn't like. Let's see, Ronaldo says, I think from a technical point of view, maybe how something looks or affects, for example, that's subjective. But if it's actually good or bad, it's subjective. Depends on how you're rating it. Good or bad can be subjective. But like, for instance, you could talk about poor writing, right? Like if you say the script was poor, you might still like the movie, but poor writing is still poor writing. You know, just like there's a lot of songs I like that technically they're poorly played. You know, the musicians obviously just can't play, but it's still a good song. That's the reason why art is such a crazy thing, because the objective and the subjective tend to overlap in a lot of ways. He's ready for Visions. It's like, ready for the rant.
Oh, I'm sure there will be some.
Yeah, I'm sure, you know, hey, trust me, we won't disappoint you. And then we come to find out, yes, there's another Wayfinder, everybody.
Oh, goody.
Like, these things are just popping up everywhere.
I'm like Pokemon trying to collect them
I know.
all.
So here's the thing that's so funny about this, right? Rey, who just gets to the Death Star throne room, basically looks around a little bit, finds a Wayfinder. Luke is looking all over for just one of these things. They've already found like 2 of them. Right? Well, kind of.
The Grandmaster in the Force Project, by the way.
Yes. Now, here's the funny thing. Luke has actually been in that throne room. So why didn't it occur to him? Now, granted, he was looking for the dagger, and because the dagger, you know, I mean, I get it.
A little
but,
snake pit.
Yeah, but you guys get where I'm going with this. It's like, it's convenient. It's like convenience overload. Now, I did like the fact that they did surprise us a little bit, and Kylo's looking at it, and then he destroys it, which just sends Rey completely over the edge, which I thought was awesome.
That's that dark side coming out of her.
Oh, and by the way, Ronaldo says something that we've been saying. Those Wayfinders should have been Sith holocrons. It's exactly... I think you might have joined after we were ranting about that.
Yeah.
Because that was... Like, right out the gate, that was one of the first things that we talked about. Was, really? Wayfinder? Okay. Whatever. All right, so then we get this Rey versus Kylo again. But this time again, I think that this is probably... Like I said, I still think... And this is subjective. I still think that the throne room duel, where it was Rey and Kylo against the Praetorian guards, you know, after Snoke was killed, I still think that was probably the best duel of the trilogy. This one, I would probably rank as number 2. I don't know. Because, again, I think that this actually had, unlike some of the other ones, this had a lot more emotional content to it. But you sound like, almost like you're not agreeing. So what would you rank as the number 2 duel of the trilogy, I might add?
Of the sequel trilogy?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. What'd you think I was talking
Um,
about?
I guess, yeah, I guess I would go with that. I mean,
Because look.
because I really, yeah, I mean, outside of the throne room with Snoke, that was like number one.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even really call the one on The Last Jedi. I mean, I'm not The Last Jedi, Force Awakens, a duel, really.
I mean, yeah, I know what you mean. It kind of was like
Technically, but
you
yeah.
there's a couple of things you can throw in there that people may not. Like, for instance, you remember the stormtrooper that was like, traitor, and he ended
Mm-hmm.
up fighting Finn? I mean, that was kind of a duel. Um, Finn versus Phasma was kind of a duel. So you could throw those in there. I mean, there was a certain amount of emotional
Yeah.
weight between Finn and Kylo. I thought that was cool. It was different. Stormtrooper fighting
This
is,
this is super quick. Yeah, I'll go with this one. Yeah, this has to be.
yeah. I mean, I would just say that this is number 2. And honestly, I don't really think that there'd be too many people out there that would argue that point either. I mean, I think it was set up to be like that. But I thought, with the rain and all that too, the water setting, I mean, it was nice. And I thought that it was emotional because, again, remember, Kylo has been tempted by the light. He's been fighting all this stuff inside for a long time. And then, of course, Leia calls to him, which I thought was interesting too. I don't know why she chose this particular moment to do it. I mean, I don't know if that was ever really covered.
No, but I think she kind of they need to write her out
Yeah.
somehow, and they needed, this was the, it made sense, and it also it was this was the changing point for you know for him to go to Ben, because he had been fighting the light the whole time. The light calls out to him, and the perfect light of his mother, right? Powerful force user. Of course, it's like you said, his mom. So there's that connection, and she's a light side person, so she's calling out to him. He's trying to resist that, and then ends up getting, you know,
Stabbed.
lanced
Yeah, it was kind of a
by
punk
good
move
old.
that she calls out to him then. And he's all like,
Yeah,
huh? And then, and then like Ray comes in and stabs him. It's like,
yeah, but then it also provides the bet, and I didn't catch this when I first saw it. Actually, the first couple of times I saw it, I didn't get it. But then, you know what? One day I happened to watch it, and I was like, hmm. Because when she heals him from that very wound, she's healing him with the light side of the
well,
force.
that's it. And that was one
So
of the
she's
things. Yeah.
pushing that back into him,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what brings him back to
Right.
Ben.
Because, obviously, so I think that there's a couple of things that are happening here. First of all, I think that Leia calling out is almost like reestablishing a connection with the light side where Ben's like, wait a minute. If I were really that far gone, you know,
I
I
shouldn't be able
mean,
to hear you like
yeah, I
this.
shouldn't be able to. Exactly. It's almost like it's a wait, maybe it's not too late. Then, of course, he gets stabbed. And then, like you said, when Ray starts to heal him, it's just pushing all this light side energy into him, just overwhelming him, which is all this
Hmm.
light side, which I think, yes, I totally agree. I think that more than anything is what really pushes him to the light side. Let me get a couple of these comments in here. So Ronaldo says, this fight is very cool, loved it. And then he's basically saying this trilogy, this one's his favorite. I can see that. Like I said, you can almost go back and forth on that one. And then he says, there was a moment to take her out, meaning Leia. This was it. And I always cry at this moment.
Oh,
And then, of course, this is the time, like Ronaldo said, if you're going to take Leia out, this is a good time where, she almost kind of does this whole, Luke thing, like, okay, that took all of her energy or whatever it was. It's time to go. Now, I do sometimes wonder if they would have done that had Carrie Fisher been alive.
I don't know. That's an interesting.
It's something to ponder.
I don't think we will never get the answer to that, of course, probably, but it's nice to think about.
Probably not, but it is an interesting discussion topic, maybe for another show. And then, of course, as if all this other stuff wasn't enough, then, of course, Kylo sees Han, and I really thought that this was just a supremely amazing little juxtaposition between what happened in The Force Awakens. I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it. They basically turned that whole dialogue around, except now it's the reverse. And I got to tell you, I was that guy that did not want to see a redemption story for him. I was adamant about it.
Well, plus, I think it'd have been cool just to see that all the way through, but
Yes.
but I did not expect Harrison Ford to show up. That caught me by surprise.
No, and in fact, when he said, "Hey, kid," I thought it was Luke. Because it would have been a lot more, that would have made more sense, actually, because of what Luke said in The Last Jedi. Like, see you around, kid. It was kind of...
Yep.
And so that's what I thought was going to happen. I thought that Luke was going to appear to him. And in a way, I think that might have been even a little bit better, because there would have been that relationship healing. But, I have to say that being that Han Solo is my favorite character... My head exploded. Plus, I couldn't believe they got Harrison Ford to do it again.
Right.
I'm like, what did they promise him? His own jet? Ronaldo says, I love this moment. It's the best in the episode. It's the other moment I always cry. Yeah, I mean, look, like I started to say, I was the guy that did not want the redemption story, but I loved Ben Solo, man. I wish we had seen more of him. I loved him as Ben Solo. I thought, wow. And I brought this up with the whole Vader thing, too, at one point. It would have actually been nice if they had kept him alive, because how cool would it have been to see, okay, now he's got to deal with the consequences of everything he's done. You can't just go back to everybody in the Resistance and go, hey, guess what? I'm a light side guy now.
I'm cool again,
Mm-hmm.
Ray, fix me.
Right. Right. And, we get Palpatine talking to Pride, which I thought was really nice. This was another one of those scenes where, I don't know, to me it really works. Where you find out that Pride served the Emperor, and I mean, I just think it would have been really cool. If I thought they could have explored this more, but I really did enjoy this scene.
Yeah, it was weird to see somebody that's not a Sith kneeling like that before him.
Right. Right. I mean, there was, again, it was all kinds of stuff. And again, it's another good example. When they have good ideas, they have good ideas. Then we get Jimmy's destruction. This is one of those things that I thought, again, it's a little bit of a retread, but I thought it was nice because this is a place that we had visited. We liked a couple of the characters here. You had Babu Frick, you had Zori Bliss. You had it was a place that our heroes spent a little bit of time. So I thought that, this did have a little bit of an emotional weight.
It's kind of like what's my dad blew up in Force Awakens.
Oh, Hazian Prime?
Hazian Prime, yes.
Yeah. Now here,
Lando.
Lando guiding Poe. This is another one, and we alluded to this in the beginning of the episode.
I love this moment.
Yeah, this is a great moment.
I love this moment. Especially he was like, we didn't know what we were doing.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of like, yeah.
I just love how honest he was.
Yeah.
Because, Leia's always kind of like, well, Poe, she's always almost made it seem like Leia almost made it seem like she always had it handled. But then here, Lando's kind of like, look, man, we did the best we could. We know what we were doing. We were just trying to,
we
had make it happen.
We had each other, and that was the thing. I mean, it was, and I like the fact that when Leia had died and Poe was just kind of like, he's obviously learned a lot, but he's just kind of like, I don't know if I'm ready for this. And now we got to mount this big, thing on an Exegol or whatever. It's like, I don't think we can do it.
And that's Leia's thing. Like, he's used to her being at the helm.
Right.
Now it's
up to him.
That's gone. Yeah. He's got to do it.
Yeah. So I thought that was just incredible. And then, of course, when Finn, because another thing we didn't really cover on that planet that Jana was on, Poe and Finn actually had a little bit of a falling out. When he's like, well, I'm not Leia, and Finn's like, I mean, there was
a little tense up there.
Yeah, it got a little bit tense, but then obviously Poe reached back out and was like, listen, you're the guy. I want you to be my other general. I thought that was a really nice touch. And it gave you that, it sort of reminded me of the Han and Lando thing in Return of the Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
It was done a little better, though, but...
Well, yeah, and the cool thing about it was that, like, once again, Finn is kind of very underutilized in this film. Out of that's kind of...
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we really covered that too much, but he wasn't really utilized as well as he should have been to be like a top bill character. However, his character, we saw some development because, he went from a stormtrooper trying to run away from everything, and he didn't know what his place was in the world, and he was just trying to just do his own thing. And then now to see him come into his own where he's like, okay, I'm going to be the hero that Rose pretty much saw in me, a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I love the elevation and the evolution of Finn. I just wish we could have saw more of that in this film.
Right, because like you and I we've said this a million times. Finn was essentially a wasted character. They could have done so much more with him. They created a great character, and they just didn't utilize him to his full potential. Then, of course, we get that scene where Luke appears to Rey, which I thought was cool. She went to Ahch-To to basically pretty much do what Luke did, run away. Like, okay, I failed. This is horrible or whatever. And she chucks the lightsaber, and he like reaches out and grabs it. I thought that was a cool moment.
Yeah. Especially because it kind of almost gave us that satisfaction that we didn't get from The Force Awakens.
Yes. Yeah, right. Where, I mean, he had chucked his lightsaber in The Last Jedi, too. That's another thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's all important, right? But the thing that was funny, though, was, that whole conversation that they had. I mean, when he's sitting there and he's talking to her, and he's more or less, because she now is where he was, he can basically right that wrong in a sense. Now that Yoda set him straight, he can set her straight.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the other big revelation in this scene is like, oh yeah, we always knew you were a Palpatine. It's like, what? When?
Right, exactly.
At what point did that happen? I mean, again,
yeah, Leia and I both knew, like,
right. It's just like, you're doing so well, and then that happens.
So it's a matter of convenience once again.
But again, and it sounds contradictory. I mean, it just sounds like I'm all over the place with this, but that was kind of cool too, though. Again, I liked it, but it made no sense. And so it just depends on the mood that I'm in when I'm watching the movie. If I'm like kind of the Star Wars purist that, doesn't... Because, I mean, if you actually look at a lot of guys, like, one of the funniest YouTube guys is the Critical Drinker. I mean, and I hate to say it, but he's spot on. With his criticisms of Star Wars, man, he is absolutely spot on. It's like, look, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I love it. I overlook a lot of the stuff, but he's not wrong. So, here's a couple of things too that let's see. Ronaldo says, I love Luke in this, the wise Jedi we wanted to see. Exactly. This is what we wanted, kind of like you said, Daryl. We're robbed of him in The Last Jedi to a degree in The Force Awakens because he's just in that last scene. He says, how did that happen? It was the will of the Force.
Yes. The will of convenience. I mean, the Force.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. But when he is talking to her, though, one of the things that I think a lot of people forget about, like it was talked about a lot when it first came out, but you don't see it coming up that much anymore. And that was that whole Luke and Leia training sequence.
Yeah.
And he was telling her,
that.
yeah, and she, well, it's like she had a vision that her son died or something like that, and that kind of put her off her game. And then, of course, that whole thing was cool. And I thought they did a really good job with that. We got to see Leia's lightsaber, which, her lightsaber was amazing.
It's pretty sweet. And we never even knew she had one. That's the cool thing about
right?
it.
We knew one. Look, in
the
Legends,
books, we knew she had.
Sure.
You're right.
And even in the new canon stuff, they alluded to it. But right. And this is why I always say, and anytime that anybody asks me anything about the Rise of Skywalker, granted, it's just so tragic that Carrie Fisher passed away. She's a person, but
right.
Looking at it strictly within the realm of these films, man, why couldn't she hang on for one more movie? Because I really wonder what they had planned. Would we have seen Leia actually using a lightsaber? How cool would that have been?
Absolutely. Even if it was for like a brief moment, like some people were trying to attack her, some, First Order troopers were trying to, and she just needed to whip it out just to deal with them so they could escape somewhere.
Blaster bolts or whatever, and then she uses the Force to like take away their guns or something. We would have lost our minds.
Yeah.
But her lightsaber was really cool. And then, of course, we get to see Luke finally lifting his X-Wing, and he lifted it all the way from the bottom. That wasn't just like the little Dagobah thing, man. That thing had to cover some distance, that wasn't just like...
When you become one with the Force, man, of course it's easy, man. Try doing it when you were still alive, buddy.
Yeah, well, that's true. But it was a nice moment.
See, Yoda did it when he was 900 years old, too.
Yeah, that's true. But, even in this whole trilogy, right? These guys are able to do anything. It's like, it doesn't even matter they're dead. Why don't you just recruit them to go fight Kylo?
At this point, right.
They can interact with everything. Don't forget that Luke, well, he was still technically alive, but still, he had the whole little Force projection thing, and he's handing Leia dice and kissing her on the cheek. And then, on top of that, you got Kylo and Rey, or like they're taking necklaces, and they're interacting. We'll see soon, handing off lightsabers. It's crazy. And then, of course, R2 does finally restore 3PO's memory. I thought that this was kind of nice. You knew they couldn't end this trilogy with 3PO not knowing who he was.
Right. They should have R2's got like a backup disc of 3PO or something.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But I do like the fact that they did take the care to not have it, like so immediate, right? Like, he basically, it was obviously an older backup, let's put it that way, which I thought was a nice touch. Then, of course, Rey, she has a whole journey to Exegol thing. Exegol is another thing. This thing is like the most treacherous thing in the world, and yet people are just flying through this. I mean, when you saw the way that
Yes.
it was portrayed in the beginning, it's like, and then eventually you got like tens of thousands of ships are flying through this.
Well, yeah, that's what they had to have the way, because it's a specific way you got to navigate through the stupid thing. It kind of reminds me of going to Mandalore or the Kessel Run. That's exactly what.
Kessel Run, yeah, definitely. And yeah, you're right, Mandalore too. But that means that all those ships would have had to go single file. But you know what? We're gonna let that go for now. Then, of course, you had that whole Battle of Exegol thing, which this I thought was pretty nice.
This just looks sweet.
It looks sweet.
Like the cinematography on this was awesome.
It was, and I really liked how it mirrors Return of the Jedi in a way, but you truly feel the hopelessness, before all the reinforcements come. Especially when Palpatine does his whole like lightning thing or whatever. I mean, it was amazing how they did manage to convey that emotion that you just felt at that moment. Like, okay, this is
nothing.
we got nothing. And I really enjoyed the emotional aspects of this. I would say that there was probably a surprising amount of emotion in this battle that you don't usually see. Of course, Rey faces Palpatine, which I thought was nice. Again, I have some problems with, granted, Palpatine was a little, indisposed. It's like hanging on a crane, basically, right?
On a crane, right.
But, the guy still has a lot of power. I just think that, I don't know, I think that everything should have been tougher. But I did like the whole concept of, all right, basically there's this whole Sith spirit thing, and I want you to kill me, and then I'm going to put my spirit into you, and you're going to basically be me and rule as Empress Palpatine.
Yeah. We've known that Palpatine was into this, like the alchemy, the whole spirit thing, and all that. But it's just kind of like, now how is this going to happen? Like, how are you going to just possess? Like, you control where your spirit goes. I mean, it's just, I don't know.
Well, I will say this, and this is probably why I'm a little bit more lenient on it, because I would probably, Obi-Wan would once feel as you do, if it hadn't been for the fact that there's been a lot of books and source material that kind of back up the whole Sith spirit thing. And so,
yeah.
See, the way I saw it was, oh, they're just taking a bunch of crap from Legends. How cool. Again, I still think it was a little bit lazy writing, but at least it showed that they're trying to honor some of the expanded material in the franchise. I guess that was why I was able to let it go. Not to mention, to be honest, it was just being weary. Look, I've already let so much crap go in the first 2 hours of this movie. By now, it's kind of like, okay,
what else? Yeah.
I mean, a Jawa could pop up with a lightsaber at this point, and I'll be like, all right, cool. I mean...
Right.
Just kind of like, at this point in the film, I'm like, all right, yeah, whatever, man. I mean,
just sit back and just enjoy.
Yep, just enjoy. I got my popcorn here. I mean, as long as I'm having a good time watching it, I guess I'm okay with it. You had these like Sith acolytes that were all in this arena. It's like, well, who are they? And where did they come from? Now, there's precedent for them, again, even in the new canon books, but not like this. I thought it was cool they had a statue of Revan that they showed in this whole thing, which firmly put him in canon. But, yeah, again, at this point in the film, man, I'm just like, okay, whatever. Let's go. Let's see how it ends. Ronaldo says this movie is kind of like an adaptation of Dark Empire. And that was the thing. I sensed elements of that. So I'm like, all right. Whatever, I'm on board. Let's do it. Until this scene. They're flying. They drop a couple of troop transports.
Yeah.
And out come these horses, and now Star
Horses.
Wars has become a Western. You have
Or
horses riding
running
on a
on the whole.
a Star Destroyer, rather.
Yeah, that was just stupid.
I'm like,
Stupid.
wow. All right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, they could have kept that.
Ronaldo says that the Sith acolytes, they're watching the Palpatine concert with popcorn and beer. That's kind of what it looked like. Looked like it was like
Yeah,
some concert thing or some really
like
weird
yeah,
play.
yeah, like an amphitheater or something like
Yeah.
that. And then it's like, when did we like? So now we're merging like Star Wars and Braveheart. Like that's
Right.
It's
Right.
like, all right.
And I mean, again, I guess if they had made it a little bit more realistic in sci-fi, or maybe they somehow landed on the hull of this thing and were trying to do something, it's like, okay, whatever, man. At
If
this
there's
point,
a ground battle and this was happening, and then
yes, there you
a
go.
space thing, that then have been fine. But like, come on now.
You know what happened in the writing room. You could just see it right now. You know what would be cool? What if we had horses on a Star Destroyer? And everybody's like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, no one's ever seen that before. There's a reason for that.
Exactly.
It's stupid.
That's it right there. Sometimes there's a reason why people don't do things. Ronaldo says, I want to see the Mandalorian riding one of those.
Watch season 1, basically.
Yeah, season 1, he
super...
ran whatever that weird alpaca looking thing. David said, I love when the goat first appearance to young Darth and how you could hear him but couldn't see him. I think he means to Kylo, maybe?
Yeah, I think he's talking about Kylo.
Yeah, I think he's talking about Kylo. And that was, see, now I was into that, especially when he did that whole I'm every voice you ever heard in your head, and it was all the different, voices and all that. Yeah, I mean, I thought, again, I mean, I'm not dumping on the entire film, just, like 70% of it. But I liked it. Keep that in mind.
Objectively.
Hey, objectively, I'm dumping on it. Subjectively, I'm like, it's cool. Sith Troopers. Here's another thing that was cool. Wasted.
Yeah.
They came up with the coolest stormtroopers like ever, and we get to see them for like 2 minutes doing nothing. Except maybe the whole horse battle. I think they were involved in that. But that's about it.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have seen a little bit more leading up to this. Maybe Palpatine unleashes the final order, right? And
to raid some town or something like that.
Yeah, to raid some town or whatever.
Led by Jenna and the rest of them, and they kind of just
Ronaldo's like, did you really like it? Really? Yeah, the Sith Trooper thing I thought was cool. But again, wasted. Much like Phasma. I mean, it was cool. I don't know if it was necessarily... I mean, the idea that Sith Troopers, I think that it's... What I liked about it was the fact that Palpatine was now embracing, look, guys, there's no pretense. I'm not the Emperor, I'm not... It's like, no, I'm a Sith Lord. Now everything's going to be branded, right? No more Stormtroopers. Now you got Sith Troopers.
The only thing about the Sith Troopers that I couldn't understand is, like, aside from the color, what's different about them?
Yeah, I know. I was kind of hoping, would they be like trained in the Force or something?
That's what I'm saying. Like, you're going to call them Sith Troopers, at least give them like a lightsaber or something.
Yeah.
They're trained in the Jedi arts or something,
Yeah, like Grievous
that
or
would have been
something,
cool.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
No, I mean, because here's the thing, right? And this goes right along with your point. It seemed like Palpatine was up in the ante on everything, right? He had Star Destroyers, but they all had like Death Star lasers.
Mm-hmm.
So even the Resistance are like, oh crap, that means now you got like these planet-killing ships, with like thousands of them.
Mm-hmm.
Why they didn't think I guess they didn't have the technology back then or whatever. Everything gets smaller, right? So, okay, he's upping it. And that's kind of what I was hoping with the Sith Trooper thing, right? It's like, okay, well, instead of doing Stormtroopers, now we're going to do like Sith Troopers. And now these guys, it would be like fighting a Sith Lord. Kinda. So I totally agree with you there. It's like, that's why I said he's branding everything. Obviously they're not Force users or trained in the Sith arts or whatever. I think he's just trying to be like, look, I'm a Sith Lord. The Sith are back. Everything's going to be Sith this and Sith that now.
Yeah, because I guess they were Imperial stormtroopers before, so now these are just Sith troopers. If you really want to,
because Palpatine
so
now,
like that's a branding thing.
Yeah, he's taking command of everything. It's his now, so it's more like a branding thing. And Ronaldo says, I think the Sith troopers are just the regular troopers of the Final Order. Yeah, it's pretty much, it's just like a branding thing. And this is where, his whole plan's revealed, right? Because he's, look, I'm going to take all this stuff back, and then, you're going to strike me down. Because, Palpatine knows, like, this clone body or whatever that he's got, it's just not cutting it, right? He's got to be carried everywhere on a crane. You can't really rule hanging from like a forklift or something. So you gotta, he has to have a plan B. And then naturally we get Ben Solo. And I absolutely love, just to show like how different he is, when he jumped on that thing and he was like, ow.
Yeah.
Just like little things like that. This I thought could have been a little bit cooler too.
Yeah, but I love when they like kind of circled around it, because they was like, "Oh, okay, you're not like Kylo anymore. You're Ben now." And he kind of looks around at him, and he kind of gives that kind of his dad that little shrug, Han
Solo shrug thing. Yeah,
like, yeah. I thought that was like really sweet that he kind of embraced his dad in that one.
Mm-hmm. And again, I cannot stress this enough. I absolutely love the Ben Solo. I really wanted to see more of this. And I was hoping that he would live through this. I Am Just Me says Palpatine equals Voldemort. It'd really be more like Voldemort equals Palpatine. Only because, well, actually, no, that's true. Only because, remember, Palpatine did come first. But yeah, absolutely. There's so many parallels there. You could do a whole show on that, actually.
Oh, yeah.
But then Palpatine, this I actually thought was pretty funny, because his whole thing was he was accidentally, before this part of it, when they were doing their whole little dyad thing or whatever, and he accidentally got some of their energy, and he saw that it was healing his body.
Mm-hmm.
He was kind of like, looking at his fingers going, oh, well, wait a second. And then we get this. It was like, okay, you know what? We're going to change things up a little bit. Instead of you striking me down and then my spirit's going to go into you, I'm thinking I don't really want to give up. Yeah, I don't want to give up rules. So here's what I'm going to do. Because you're a dyad, and this only happens like probably every 3 or 4 films, let's be honest. But once every 20,000 years, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to suck the life force out of both of you, and then this body will become at least Return of the Jedi-ish, and I'm going to do this myself. Which,
I mean, not a bad idea.
No. I mean, I would do it. I was on board with this. I can't say that I'm on board with a lot in this film. I enjoyed it. Just,
But this is the part, though, where I felt like the whole diet and the Force needed to be explained more. Like, okay, we're dealing with it, so deal with it. Like, oh, you're a dyad in the Force. What does that mean?
I know. Look, that's so true. I mean, once again, that's really where they dropped the ball, was they tried to introduce a bunch of concepts that they didn't explain. That if you're a hardcore, yeah, sure, all the hardcores can go, well, in the Legends novel, whatever, they established. Yeah, most people aren't like that. If you're going to introduce something in a film, you have to explain it in the film. That's kind of like a rule of filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
Now in the case of a franchise, you can reference other things in the same media. So if you wanted to bring up something, say, that happened in, I don't know, Empire Strikes Back, okay, cool. But that's not what's happening here. Ronaldo says, I'm going to make a wild guess. I think we'll see Ben Solo again. Maybe not Adam Driver, but some version of the character. Yeah, I mean, and I would actually even venture to say that, because Adam Driver has sort of reversed things. He said, look, if the script is good, I'll do it. You know, and I think also Adam Driver's whole thing is he just doesn't want to be nailed down to a trilogy. Like, if it's a one-off, or maybe it's a Disney Plus series or something, he would probably do that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so then, you know, they put out the call or whatever, and then you hear Lando's voice, and then boom, you see just this insane amount of ships. And, you know, a lot of times people have pointed out the ghost in there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's just like all kinds of stuff. But I have to admit, I got chills when I first saw this. And in fact, even when I watched it a few days ago, I got chills again. I mean, this is just, it was perfectly set up. Now,
oh yeah, I mean, after like Palpatine was going berserk with his lightning and everything, and it's just like, you know, you kind of forgot about that the other group of people were coming. That's the thing I love about it. It's like you got so wrapped up in the story of Kylo, well, Ben and Rey and Palpatine, and then excuse me, the space battles that we had with Poe and everybody else out there. You kind of forgot about the reinforcements, and then when they show up, it's like, all right, now it's a
right.
party.
Now, again, you know, me being me in this thing, I have to echo what a lot of people have pointed out, that it's like, okay, Lando was able to somehow go and call all these ships and get all these people there in really what spans, I think they figured out it was like maybe 12 hours. I mean, when you really stop and think about it, that's what I'm saying. The key to this movie is just don't think about it. Just watch, consume, and enjoy. But don't think about it. Because it's not even one of those, well, don't think too hard about it. No, don't think about it at all. If you think about it at all, the whole thing falls apart.
It's kind of like Han said when you go into Maz Kanal's cantina. It's like, don't look at it. What? Don't look at what? Any of it.
Yeah,
Just
right. I mean, just accept it. Accept the fact that Lando somehow can defy the laws of any physics whatsoever and round up tens of thousands of ships in hours, when he actually had to try to travel. But I'm going to move on. So David said 70% of the movie is bad, but it's good. The Batman's main character was trash, but it's one of the best Batmans. Shaking my head. Y'all are still my favorite despite your flaws. Again, don't get too hung up on it. Remember what I said. You can't think about it. There's a lot of bad execution, bad writing, a lot of things in this. Doesn't necessarily mean it's not an enjoyable film. It just means that it was poorly done.
mm-hmm.
You know, and especially when you compare this to the original trilogy, that was different. That's the reason why A New Hope was up for a bunch of Oscars, and these movies might have gotten, maybe, if they're
American
lucky,
Choice Awards.
well, no, they'll get like best editing or best sound design or something like that. Because again, I mean, from a, you know,
Technical
visual
standpoint.
aspect and all that, yeah, I mean, it is still Lucasfilm doing Star Wars, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, you're going to get the cool effects. But, you know, by comparison, it's just, there's just a lot to pick apart. Because that's what this basically is. We're picking it apart. Speaking of fantastic effects, this is another thing that, again, they could have handled a lot of this stuff better, but you can really say that about almost every scene in the film. But you did have to admire, which is why the ending doesn't make as much sense. You have to admire the fact that these guys, like Palpatine, has gotten so powerful now that look at what he can do. He can shoot all this lightning up in the air and just start pretty much obliterating ships. You know, I mean, this was kind of spectacular.
Well, once again, it's kind of like, how are these ships not destroyed? Is my question.
I don't know.
Because it's kind of like, well, because you almost have to wonder, like, okay, what is force lightning really? Because if you think about it, like Luke was getting here like fricasseed for like 20 minutes at close range by like what seems as like,
Well,
so
from
it
that
can't be like the
standpoint,
traditional lightning that we see like during a rainstorm. I mean, it's got to be like a
that's true. Because
super
if you
milder
accidentally
version of
touch
that.
like an open plug or something, man, you're like, ah.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
Well, there's
it's not
different
like you got
degrees of it.
L2130 or something.
I mean, this
Yeah.
would actually be interesting because one of these days, you know, how we did our What is the Force and all that stuff, which actually, those are the programs that we do that get like thousands upon thousands of views. We should actually do one on what is Force lightning and just discuss it to death because not only would you have to really look at a lot of the characteristics of it, but there's actually red lightning. Red lightning is the really deadly stuff. Vader was supposedly in one of the comics able to wield that or something, but I know there's a difference between the two. But yeah, I mean, again, it's a convenience thing, right? It's kind of like look at the point the right way. Look at the visual coolness of this. And you did see it destroy a couple of ships, but you know, that's going everywhere, man. It looks like one of those like little static ball things and you know, you can
Oh yeah.
touch your finger on or whatever.
Right.
And just don't think too hard. Just look at the pretty effects. This is a thing that I've since made peace with it, but it kind of bugs me. You know, once again, I mean, look, Rey's already significantly overpowered, so I guess it's fine. And now she's finally, you know, almost vanquished, and once again, be with me, be with me. But it was kind of cool, though, that all the Jedi started talking, and I think the idea behind it was that she wasn't really able to make that full connection with the Force, and now she can. And, you know, now she basically has all the Jedi behind her, and, you know, then you get that incredibly stupid, I'm all the Sith and I'm all the Jedi. And, but it, again, it's like Palpatine, you know, this guy doesn't learn. It's like, just stop shooting lightning and you'd be fine.
Right.
You know?
But he's so arrogant and he thinks he can overpower people, especially who he deems are less powerful than him. So he's like, this should work. He's kind of like that, he's very persistent. I give him that.
Yeah. I love, not this comment's funny, but Ronaldo's is the best. I got to make a t-shirt of it. So David says, you know, when greatest of all time pulled all those ships in the air, showing young Vader the Empire he could have. Movie magic. Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. He's talking about more the beginning of the film. When he basically showed Kylo all the final order ships. But this has got to be a t-shirt. It was terrible, but kind of cool. Eric, 2023. David said, I hated that spirit scene too. But again, that's because from a story perspective, it's like, really? But, you know, visually, it's nice. And you basically have this person who's learned the Force all of like 10 minutes destroy Palpatine. Now, everybody's going to be like, well, Luke did it. But he didn't.
Right. Vader did.
Vader did. Luke was actually beaten. And Luke was a grandson of the Force directly. Now, you could make the argument, okay, he's like Palpatine's, or she's Palpatine's offspring, so there's a little bit of power there. And I can hang with that. I mean, But again, we shouldn't have to really find all these in-depth explanations. That's the problem. That's the problem I have with this, is that we have to look for this stuff. We as Star Wars fans have to use our knowledge of the franchise to explain what's going on. And I think that's what bothers me sometimes. And then, yeah, Palpatine ends up more or less destroying himself until Lucasfilm needs him again. And then you can bet that, that'll be
Sheev will be back.
Yep, he'll be back. Then of course, this was nice where Ben turned around, healed Rey. Now, of course, yes, I have a problem with this too. Once again, is it a cool scene? If you just take it in and of itself, sure. It's touching because Rey healed him. Now he's light side guy. He's going to heal her. Here's my question, though. Where did he learn this?
Well, he could have learned this back with Luke, though.
Maybe. I guess that there is that possibility. It's flimsy, but I'll go with it because, I mean, why not, right?
A little shaky.
And like we said, I mean, it is somewhat, especially if Obi-Wan actually used the Force to heal Luke in A New Hope, you could kind of say, well, all right, maybe this is like a Force 101 kind of thing. But it was nice. But this made no sense to me.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah,
this is just a forced, and you can even tell it was forced. I mean, if you really watch this scene, it wasn't, it wasn't.
Yeah, there was no build-up for this.
None. It's like up until this point, they were trying to kill each other. Now, yes, she was kind of like, oh, well, kind of like there's this good in him. See, if this had happened in The Last Jedi, I think I would have been able to hang with it a little bit more. Because she was really on that whole, hey, there's good in you thing. But, Han Solo was like a father to you. He killed, I mean, like all the things that, if you really stop and think of everything that Kylo has done to her up until this point, this is just ridiculous. I mean, unless you can, I don't know, maybe Kylo had a little bit of aphrodisiac along with that Force healing thing. Like maybe there's a little date rape drug in that, that he was kind of beaming in there too. Like,
well, he's used to probing women's minds, so he might have threw a little bit in there.
Maybe he was doing a little be with me. I mean, if you know what I'm saying. So I mean, hey, I mean, all right.
He might transport more than healing. Let's just say that.
Yeah, exactly. Let me get to a couple of these chats here. So Ronaldo, let's start here. Ronaldo says, love the voices scene and the way she defeated Palpatine was very cool. Yeah, okay. Sure. Greatest of all time is arrogant for the same reason the Qs are arrogant. They run the yard. Hey, we get the Star Trek reference in. And then Ronaldo says, what do you think of the theory that she's pregnant with Kylo's son? I guess I've heard that, but yeah. I mean, that would have to be like a total Force. Like, all right, maybe in that healing, there's a little bit of a baby
Kyle left
elixir.
A little behind.
Yeah. Little DNA swap there. Yeah, I think that would just be. I hope they never.
They do that.
Yeah,
if they did that, that was stupid.
That would be really stupid. I am just me says, why the kiss? Yeah, exactly. Of course, exactly. Ronaldo. I love that kiss. There, I said it. I love it.
I think if Ronaldo's a hopeless romantic.
Yeah, well, and I understand, believe it or not, because, again, it's in a lot of ways because he's the villain. it would be the typical storytelling trope of, she turns the bad boy type thing, around or
Mhm.
whatever. I mean, it would actually be that kind of a thing, and so I can understand that.
I think a strong hug would have sufficed, honestly. And I'm not saying that just, but I think like the nature of their relationship would have been kind of like a welcome home type thing, like welcome back to where you used to be,
Right.
versus like this is
Exactly.
like
Like,
some love thing. Like
yeah. I
there's no
mean,
precedent
granted,
for it.
overcome with emotion. I don't know. Maybe she's so happy that we
Maybe
could
she thought it
be
was Finn or Poe. I don't know.
maybe that shirtless scene just hit her.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, who knows? Um, so David said she kissing her brother? No. They're not
No, no,
brother.
no,
They're
no.
not brother and
No.
sister.
That was
Yeah,
Leia and Luke.
that was Luke and Leia. We did that in the last trilogy. I am just me says I feel like we saw the kiss coming though. I was like, ugh, here we go. Yep, we did.
Exactly.
We saw it coming.
Absolutely.
Ronaldo says, but it's kind of weird because they're like cousins. We know Skywalkers always kiss the wrong people.
Kissing cousins. There we go.
Basically, Skywalkers are incestual people that lose limbs. That's pretty much the thing
Their lot in
is.
life.
Yeah, that's their lot in life. I'm just me laughing at the strong hug comment.
Yeah. It's like a firm handshake.
Like a firm handshake. Well,
All right.
once, of course, the whole final order or whatever is vanquished, now you get this little celebration scene that's kind of reminiscent of the end of Return of the Jedi, right? So you get this whole thing going to where you see the different scenes. I like the fact that you see Cloud City, you see the Ewoks. Of course, you get the more personal one where Finn, Poe, and Rey are hugging, and you get all the Resistance people. And I thought it was a nice. I thought it was, it was good.
Yeah, it was kind of reminiscent of Return of the Jedi.
It was, and then of course Chewie gets his medal.
Finally.
Now here's the thing, and maybe you guys in the chat always still have time left, or you guys are watching this and after the fact it's not live. Want to put it in the comment section? That'd be great too. Some people have theorized that Chewie wasn't really getting his own medal, that this medal was actually Han's medal, and he's just taking possession of.
It's like an heirloom now.
Yeah, well, kind of like the dice.
Right. Leia gets the dice, he gets the medal.
Yeah.
Everyone's a winner.
I think it would actually be better if that was his medal for his role in this thing. Because, I mean, come on, man. Chewbacca has really done a lot. If you really stop and think about everything that he's done.
He's been there the whole time.
The whole time. And it was established earlier in this film. He's like 250 years old. And then, of course, we get that really cool yellow lightsaber that Rey made from her staff. Man,
yeah.
Especially in the theater, when that thing ignited, I was like, whoa, yeah that's... I would have liked to have seen that thing in action, I know,
right?
I mean, she basically had buried Luke and Leia's lightsaber, kind of used the Force to push it into the ground. And then she has this beast of a lightsaber, which I thought was nice. So, hey, if they do make more Rey movies, the one bright side, no pun intended, is that we actually get that lightsaber. So I'll be looking forward to that one. And then, of course, finally, I don't know, I have mixed feelings about this too. It's kind of like, oh, who are you? I'm Rey Skywalker. It's like, see, again, to me, and I could see this both ways. If there's people out there that like the scene, I can understand it, right? She's trying to honor the people who trained her, who more or less gave her this life.
Basically, her adoptive family.
Yeah, they're like her adoptive family in a way. But I also think that it would have actually been from a storytelling perspective, more interesting if she had taken the name Palpatine and now it's going to stand for something good in the universe.
Yeah, that's true.
You know?
But it'll take a whole lot to make that happen, considering what
Well,
that
yeah.
name.
I'm not saying it's
You
not
know,
an easy road. I mean, she probably was thinking about it. Like, I'm Ray, but you know what? I'm Skywalker. That
yeah,
name's going
that
to get
has
me a little
more.
bit, a little bit
Yeah,
easier of
exactly.
a path.
It's kind of like, yeah, I'd rather be Obama than Trump or something.
Yeah,
People have mixed feelings
it's kind
about.
of right. It's like, the name, it's kind of like I could either prove a point or I can have a little bit easier of a thing. But we'll have to see. All right, let me get through these last chats here. So Ronaldo said, "Yeah, Chewie finally got his medal." Yeah, I know, and he agrees to. He also thinks that it's Han's medal. Ronaldo goes on to say, "I think the lightsaber is amazing. We'll definitely see it in the next movie if it happens." And David, of course, says, "She even a Skywalker? Thought she was a Palpatine. Technically, she's a
She is
Palpatine."
biologically, yes, she's a
Yeah,
Palpatine.
but
However, she adopted the name Skywalker.
right. Ronaldo says, "I like that scene, and from a certain point of view, imagine trying to rebuild the Jedi Order with the Palpatine name." Yeah,
Exactly.
you might not get a whole lot of people signing up. I Am Just Me makes a good point. It's like she just like adopted herself. Or like, put herself into the family on her own. I mean, that was actually one of the things that I thought. Now,
All right.
you can make the argument, though, that when Luke and Leia appeared to her, that was sort of like their, hey,
Blessing.
yeah, exactly. Ronaldo's like, it's like if I was called Ronaldo Hitler. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, it would be the same basic thing, only even worse. If I could bring her problems, not only with the Jedi, but political problems, yeah, it could.
Absolutely.
It definitely could. So yeah, it makes, and again, it was one of those things that it makes sense either way. Because again, I mean, you almost could look at it like this too, where, she's like Rey, and I think she actually says Skywalker though before Luke and Leia appear to her, but it almost would have been funny if she was kind of like Rey, and then they appear looking at her like, you better say Skywalker after everything we've done for you. But yeah,
what crap he put us through.
right? Exactly.
Grateful little girl.
I'm grateful. And you know what? But she can't be a Skywalker. She still has both hands. So
For now.
For now.
Wait till the next movie.
It's kind of like, see, that's the thing.
That's how you know you're really a Skywalker.
Yeah, exactly. You know you're a Skywalker if you lose a hand or an arm or something like that.
Well, Leia never lost anything, so except for her planet, but
yeah. Entire civilization, that'll do it.
Guess that has to compensate for something.
Exactly. So let's see. Ronaldo's chat's popping in. He says, if she kept the Palpatine name, it would have been poetic. But from a strategic point of view, doesn't make sense. And yeah, I think that's the point that I'm making, is that you can see where it's almost like, look, I'm going to take her name, and I'm Just Me says, and her life. I'm basically going to take this name and I'm going to make it mean something positive. I want to turn it around. But really, if you think about it, she has no reason to. I mean, basically her parents were like clones or something.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's really no reason to even honor that, any of that. So the Skywalker thing definitely makes sense. All right, well, that was a rather lengthy show.
You don't say.
Yeah, about 3.5 hours. I remember we used to do this a couple of times, but hey, you know what? We had to end this whole thing with pretty much a nice, good, long, meaty show with some great chats. So that's another thing I wanted to do too. I wanted to thank you guys Ronaldo says it was a fun discussion, and it was a fun discussion. This is the kind of thing that we really like to do. We would love it if everybody were chatting in like this for all of our shows. Of course, I know sometimes we kind of bone you guys by not having a show when we say we're going to, but, you know, we try. That's what the notification bell's for, by the way. You click that, you'll always know when we're really going live. So we try to do it every Monday and Friday at 8. So this Friday, because we weren't able to do the show last Friday, we are going to cover the season finale of The Mandalorian. I mean, I've read about it. I'm purposely not watching it, though, until closer to when we do the show, because I want it fresh in my mind. So hopefully you guys can join us this Friday at 8, live, where we are going to do our whole review, recap, whatever, of the season finale of The Mandalorian, and discuss where it could go from there. So you're not going to want to miss that. I don't know what we're going to do for next Monday, actually. Still about a week or two away from our Visions review, which I know you're looking forward to.
With bated breath.
Yes. Or maybe you'll just hold your breath until you pass out or die. And But with that said, you know, make sure that you check us out. I'm sure by Friday we're going to know what we're going to do Monday. Maybe we'll start cracking into some of the, you know, because when we've been doing all these review shows, first of all, we didn't technically finish the Bad Batch reviews. There's like 5 or 6 or whatever, 10 more episodes of that we haven't done yet. So we need to get back to that at some point. If you guys have an idea of a topic or something you would like to discuss, let us know. We'll do it. I mean, after all, we do this for you guys. So definitely let us know in either the chat section in the next like 20 seconds or so, or the comment section. So with that, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.